Welcome to Goofy Harry. Today's adventure. What if Harry Potter was the secret son of Nyx, primordial goddess of night? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. A child of night. The island had no name on any map the ministry kept, and the boat that carried them there knew the way without a helmsman. Lily Potter stood at the prow with her hair knotted tight against the wind, one hand on the salt-packed rail and the other resting over the space below her collarbone, where she had wanted a child long enough that the wanting had become a second heartbeat. James held the tiller, or pretended to. The tiller moved by itself. He had only put his hand on the wood because he was nervous and needed somewhere to put his hand. "You're sure," he said. He had said it 6 times since they left the mainland. It was not really a question anymore. It was a charm against panic. "I'm sure," Lily said, and she meant it, and she was also terrified, the way she had learned to be terrified in her mother's kitchen as a child, when her mother had first taught her the names to say when the moon went wrong. Eleanor Evans had been a nurse. Eleanor Evans had also been a woman whose own grandmother had been the last living daughter of a priestess out of a cold hill in Boeotia, and the family had kept that line the way other families kept a silver teapot, out of sight, passed down, used only for company. Tonight was company. The island drew itself out of the sea the way a face draws itself out of sleep. There was no beach, only stones the color of wet slate, stacked as if a patient child had arranged them 1,000 years ago, and no storm had since disturbed the work. Above the stones rose an olive grove twisted from the wind, and above the olive grove a single flat-topped hill. On the hill nothing stood, that was the point. Something had stood there once, and nothing stood there now, and the space where the thing had stood remembered. "Tide won't turn for 4 hours," James said, pulling the boat close. "After that it won't want us here. After that it won't be us," Lily said, and James did not ask her what she meant because he had chosen to be here and he had chosen her, and he had chosen to stop asking her what she meant whenever she went quiet like that. They climbed together. She had the salt in a linen bag against her hip, and a knife of cold iron in her belt, and a wooden bowl strapped to her back, and James had a coil of red thread and a candle and a small silver mirror that had belonged to his own great-grandmother, who had been the kind of witch who wrote spells into the backs of recipe cards. At the top of the hill, Lily set the bowl down in the exact center of the flat where nothing would grow. She laid the salt in a ring around the bowl so precisely that the grains might have been placed by a jeweler. She spoke no words yet. James lit the candle with a glance, a spark of will, nothing dramatic, and the wind did not touch the flame. Above them the moon began to eat itself. Lily knelt. She had practiced this in her mind for 3 months. She had rehearsed every syllable with her mother's cousin in Crete, had written the vowels onto the inside of her wrist so that she could not forget them, had scrubbed her wrist raw so that she would not be tempted to read them rather than speak them from her own lived throat. She spoke them now. James did not understand the words. The words were older than understanding. They were not Greek the way Greek is taught, not even Greek the way Greek is remembered in Athens. They were what Greek had been afraid of when Greek was young. The eclipse deepened. The moon became a coin of old blood. The stars above the island, which had until that moment looked the way stars look over any water, drew closer, one step and then another, and then they stopped because something else had entered the sky with them and the stars were polite. Lily did not look up. She looked into the bowl. The bowl was full of seawater and one of her tears and one drop of James's blood. In the bowl the eclipse reflected. In the bowl the eclipse did not quite match the sky. "Mother," she said in a language the wind had taught her mother's mother, "I have nothing to offer that is worth you. I have only my love and my marriage and my willing throat. Take any of them or none, but hear me. I cannot make a child. I want one, not for the world, for our house." Around the salt ring the grass had stopped moving. Around the salt ring the air had stopped moving. James, because he was brave and because he was not a fool, did not speak. He stood 3 paces back with the candle cupped in both hands as though it were the only warm thing left. Something came into the bowl. It was not a face. It was the attention a face might throw if a face had nothing better to do than look at a small woman on a small hill for a small moment. The attention was cold, and it was vast, and it was not unkind. It saw the wanting, it saw the oath. It saw James standing 3 paces back, white as the candle he was holding, and it considered him, and it did not reject him. A child, the attention thought, and because attention is not speech, the words arrived inside Lily the way a memory arrives, already true. "A child of your house and mine. He will be James's. He will also be mine. There is no cost you can pay me tonight. The cost will come. You will not live to see what I make of him. Do you accept?" She was a practical woman. She had rehearsed practical answers. In the moment she dropped all of them. "Yes," she said. "Oh yes." The bowl boiled briefly and was still. The moon above unfinished a quarter of its eating and then reversed as if embarrassed to be watched. The stars stepped back. The wind returned. James said, "Lily," and his voice was cracked, and she stood up and walked 3 paces to him and took his face in both of her hands, and she said, "It's all right, it's done, it's ours." They did not know yet what it was that they had done. They knew only that when they came down off the island 2 hours later, not 4, the boat moved with them willingly, and the sea did not snap at the keel, and when they slept that night in a safe house near Plymouth, Lily dreamed of a cradle already rocking. 9 months later, almost to the day, James Potter laughed until he cried in a hospital room in Godric's Hollow and could not let go of his son's hand. "He's holding it back," he kept saying. "Lily, he's holding my finger back. Look at him, look at his grip, look at him." "He has your hair, James," Lily said, exhausted, radiant, furious with love. "Just look at his hair, Merlin." "He has your eyes," James said. He did. He had green eyes. That was what everyone said afterward. He had green eyes and his father's messy hair, and he laughed loudly, and he cried loudly, and he slept as hard as a stone. What no one said, because they did not notice, because they were not supposed to notice, was that if you watched him in the cradle for a very long time without blinking, his shadow on the nursery wall was not always the same shape as the boy who made it. Sometimes the shadow was a little taller, sometimes it had one more small, curled hand, sometimes it held for half a second at a time the suggestion of a crown. Lily noticed, James noticed. They did not speak of it. They had agreed not to speak of it. They had agreed to love him first and explain him later. Later in the event did not come. It was a very ordinary Halloween to almost everyone. It was a very ordinary Halloween to Petunia Dursley, slicing a pumpkin on the other side of the country and complaining about the price of sugar. It was a very ordinary Halloween to Mrs. Figg's cat, whose only complaint all evening was a sparrow on the fence, and to a man in a long black coat who was deciding, in a café in Marseille, whether to walk to the end of a particular street. It was a very ordinary Halloween to everybody except James Potter, who opened a front door in Godric's Hollow and in the instant between opening and seeing understood exactly what he had opened to. "Lily," he shouted up the stairs, "take Harry and go, run, I'll hold him off." It was a noble plan. It was the plan of a young man who had not yet been killed. He held his wand up and he stood in a doorway, and for a period of about 40 seconds he fought with a skill and a speed and a grim cleverness that the man across from him would have, in a different lifetime, admired. Then he was dead. Upstairs, Lily Potter did what she had planned to do for a year. She did not plead for her own life. She pleaded for her son's. That was the part the cat lady next door heard, later, when the lights came back on and the neighbors opened their shutters. The part the cat lady did not hear, because the cat lady did not know what to hear, was the part where Lily pressed the soft wax of a candle into a single sign on the footboard of Harry's crib. The sign was made of 6 curves and 1 straight line, and she had drawn it in her notebook 100 times in the last year, and she had drawn it on the inside of her own rib cage with her fingernail on the night she had first held him. She drew it now in beeswax. She drew it now in the last minute of her life. She did not have time to pray. She was a practical woman. She had rehearsed practical words. "Mother," she said, under the taller man's mocking laughter, "he is yours now. Take this, the rest of what I am, and keep him." Then the man laughed and spoke, and she died standing up and fell across the crib, and her blood touched the beeswax sign, and the beeswax sign became, for an instant, warm. Voldemort raised his wand. The baby in the crib was not crying. The baby in the crib was looking directly at him. The baby had green eyes. The baby had his father's messy hair. The baby's shadow on the nursery wall was a little taller than the baby and had, for half a second, the suggestion of a crown. Lord Voldemort said, "Avada Kedavra," and the room filled with green light, and the green light was met in midair by a second light that was not green. The second light was the color of a sky 5 minutes after sunset, when the blue has gone cold and the first star has opened an eye. The second light had come, as far as any witness ever reconstructed, from the shadow of a baby on a nursery wall. The 2 lights met. The taller light won. When hours later a very large man named Hagrid came into the ruined house and dug through the plaster to find a small, crying boy under a fallen beam, Hagrid did not notice the beeswax sign on the footboard. No one had told him to. He wrapped the child in his coat, and he wept into his beard, and he carried the child out of the house and up into the sky, and above his head the stars that had been watching all night stopped watching and politely, one by one, went out for a few moments and then came back on. 10 years passed, the way 10 years pass. Privet Drive was and remained the color of porridge. The Dursleys were and remained the kind of people who owned a barometer and consulted it. Harry Potter, who did not know he was Harry Potter in any meaningful sense, who was called Boy when he was in trouble and you when he was not, who slept in the cupboard under the stairs because his aunt could think of nowhere else to put him, and his uncle preferred not to think about him at all, grew up small and quiet and watchful. He also, as he grew, noticed things. He noticed first that his shadow on the wall at night did not always match him. He was 6 years old when he noticed it, and he was very calm about the noticing because he did not have anyone to tell, and a secret you cannot tell becomes, very quickly, a secret you can keep. He would lie on the thin mattress in the cupboard and watch his shadow in the seam of light under the door, and his shadow would sometimes have an arm up when his arm was down. He developed a small game. He would hold up 2 fingers under his chin and watch his shadow. The shadow would hold up 3. He would hold up 3. The shadow would hold up 4. Above 4, the shadow got bored of the game and went back to him. Harry took this to mean that his shadow could count, but only up to 4, and was therefore smarter than Dudley. He noticed, second, that he could see at night. He did not know until he was 8 that other people could not. Aunt Petunia, coming into his cupboard one night to complain about a noise he was not making, bumped her shin on the vacuum cleaner and swore softly. Harry, sitting up perfectly calm in the pitch dark, had not bumped anything ever. He said nothing. He took her swearing as data. Other people apparently needed light. He noticed, third, that the owls in the park by the school talked to him. They did not talk in English. He did not think of them as talking at all at first. They simply looked at him when he went past, and sometimes they said a low, short sound, and sometimes he knew exactly what they meant. "Child of the house," one of them said to him once, and he carried the phrase around like a warm stone in his pocket for weeks before it occurred to him that no one had said it out loud. He noticed, fourth, that he had dreams. The dreams were quiet. That was what he liked about them. Dudley's bedroom above the cupboard rumbled and burped and sometimes shook dust down into Harry's eyes, and Harry's dreams were the opposite of that. In the dreams, he was on a hill somewhere. Sometimes there was water nearby. Sometimes there were stars very close to his face. There was always a voice, although the voice did not speak in words so much as in weather. The weather was cold and the weather was not unkind. The weather knew his name. Harry did not know what his name really was. Harry seemed short, and Potter was a word people said when they were angry, but the weather in the dream knew, and it was a nice feeling having a name known by the weather. He did not, through all of this, act out. He did not cry. He did not throw things. He did not, as Dudley did, explode at strangers. He learned quickly that the smaller you were, the less people hit you. He learned even more quickly that the quieter you were, the less people noticed that you had no bruises when, by the math of their household, you should have. That was because Harry had another trick he was not ready to think about yet. The trick announced itself on a Tuesday in July, the summer he was 10. Dudley and 3 of Dudley's friends had cornered him at the end of the alley behind the off-license. It was not the first time, and Harry had stopped pretending to himself that it would be the last. The alley was narrow, and the bins were full, and there was nowhere behind him to go. Piers Polkiss had a bit of broken piping in his hand and was, with the slow deliberation that Harry had come to recognize as the signature style of cruel children practicing to be cruel adults, tapping it against his thigh. "Say please," Piers said. "Don't," Dudley said. That was not mercy, that was anticipation. Dudley did not want Harry to say please. Dudley wanted to be the one who got to hit him first. Harry looked down at his own shadow. He was at that moment very tired. He had not slept well. The dreams had been louder the last 3 nights. The weather in the dreams had been louder. The weather had said not yet 3 nights in a row, and he had taken this to mean not yet, not yet, not yet, and he was tired of not yet. He was tired of the alley. He was tired of Dudley. He was tired of Piers. He was tired of porridge-colored houses and of porridge-colored skies. "Please," he said politely, and he meant it, and he did not mean it to Piers. The sun went out, not all of the sun and not all of the alley, just the alley Harry was in. The sunlight at the mouth of the alley where the high street was stayed where it was, busy and ordinary, a woman pushing a pram, a man unloading crates. In the alley the light bent, it bent downward. It bent into Harry's shadow, and from his shadow it rose up along the bin lids and the brickwork and made a shape like a high-walled hall. And within the high-walled hall, Piers and Dudley and the other 2 boys were suddenly, privately, alone with something that had not been there a second ago. Harry did not know what he had done. Harry felt very calm. Harry felt, which was the strangest thing about the moment, as though something had said patiently like this and shown him, the way a patient adult shows a child how to tie a shoelace. Piers dropped the pipe. It did not ring. It fell into the dark, and the dark, as far as Harry could tell, swallowed it. "Leave," Harry said. He said it quietly. The high-walled hall liked the quiet. The high-walled hall bent toward his quiet. They left. They did not run. They could not. They walked very carefully past him, and they did not look at him, and Dudley, whose face at this range Harry could see perfectly clearly even though the sun was not in the alley anymore, was crying with his mouth open and not making any noise at all. They reached the mouth of the alley. They stepped out into the sun. They broke into a run. The alley went back to being an alley. Harry stood very still for several minutes. Then he bent down and picked up the pipe and put it into the nearest bin, because he had been raised to be tidy, even by people who did not deserve him to be tidy. Then he walked home along the sunny side of the street, and as he walked, a raven on the hospital wall turned its head exactly the angle a raven's head turns when it means to speak. Pi Omicron Tau Epsilon, the raven said politely. Harry, who had never heard ancient Greek in his life and had not yet learned to be surprised by anything, said, "Soon, I think." The raven bobbed once, satisfied with him. Muita Tau Eat Aro, that word he did not know. He felt it, though, the way he felt the weather in the dreams. He felt it in the hinge of his jaw. He walked the rest of the way home with his hands in his pockets and his heart louder than it had been in years. The letter came 3 days later. It came first to number 4. Then when Vernon Dursley burned it, it came to number 4. Then when Vernon Dursley sealed the letter slot, it came through the kitchen window. Then when Vernon Dursley boarded up the kitchen window, it came through the fireplace, unharmed by soot. Petunia, who had recognized the handwriting on the first envelope and had not slept since, said nothing. Vernon, who had not recognized the handwriting and who was accustomed to understanding the world by shouting at it, shouted at the letters until he ran out of breath. Harry, at the breakfast table, watched a letter with his name on it skate across the linoleum and tuck itself under the toe of his shoe, patient as a cat, and allowed himself the first small smile of his life that he did not bother to hide. 3 days after that, Hagrid arrived. Hagrid was very large, and Hagrid was very loud, and Hagrid wept when he saw Harry, and Hagrid called him a great lad, and Hagrid gave him a cake that had clearly been sat on and that Harry ate anyway because the gesture was kind, and because Harry had learned that you eat what kind people give you or else they stop giving you things. They left the hut on the rock in the middle of the night. Hagrid explained wizardry the whole way back to London. Harry listened to perhaps half of it. He was watching, over Hagrid's enormous shoulder, the sea below the boat. The sea below the boat had twice gone entirely still for the length of a breath, as though a very large face had bent low over it, and Harry could not tell Hagrid that, because Hagrid would not understand that, and anyway Harry did not himself understand it. Diagon Alley was a very loud idea packed into a very narrow street. Harry, who had lived in a cupboard, found it delightful. He bought books. He bought a cauldron. He bought robes at Madame Malkin's while standing on a small wooden stool, and while he stood there a pale, thin boy next to him on a second stool asked him if he played Quidditch, and Harry said, "I don't know what that is," very calmly, and the pale, thin boy sniffed as though Harry had just confessed to not knowing how to use a fork. Above them, Harry happened to notice, the wall behind him bore his shadow, and his shadow, as he stood on the stool with his arms out, had lowered its head. Not bowed, lowered. As though in thought, as though listening. Madame Malkin, who was many things but was not inattentive, glanced up from her pins, glanced at the wall and said nothing, and pinned Harry's hem with slightly more care than she had pinned the pale, thin boy's. Harry caught her eye. Madame Malkin gave him the faintest, briefest nod. He bought a wand last. Ollivander's was small and dusty and smelled of varnish and a kind of gentleness that dust cannot quite manufacture on its own. Ollivander himself was the gentleness. Ollivander measured Harry's arms and his elbows and the distance from his wrist to his nostril and several other distances that Harry could not account for. Ollivander handed him wands. The wands did not agree with Harry. Ollivander, delighted rather than frustrated, kept up a kind of cheerful commentary. Tricky customer, no matter, we shall find the one." 11 minutes in, Ollivander went very still. He said "ah" softly to himself, and he climbed a ladder, and he brought down a long, thin box from a shelf near the back, and he opened the box. Inside lay a wand of holly, pale in the shop light. Harry picked it up. The shop filled with a warm gold, as though someone had opened a window and invited the afternoon in. Ollivander smiled. Then Ollivander's smile faltered, and he turned his head very slowly to the left, because in the back of the shop, in a case Harry had not noticed, a case older than the others, its glass clouded with something like breath, a second wand had begun, very faintly, to hum. Ollivander crossed to the case. He did not open it. He stood in front of it with his hands folded behind him and his head tilted, the way a man stands in front of a painting he has known all his life and only now has a question about. The wand in the case was black. The wand in the case had a grain like hawthorn but darker, and at its heart, invisible to anyone but Ollivander, Harry later understood that there had been a single long hair taken. Legend had it from the mane of a nightmare, not a dream horse, a mare of the night, bred out of the old dark. Curious, Ollivander said to himself, the way a man says it who has been in business for 110 years and is determining whether to be afraid. Curious, curious, curious. Mr. Potter, the holly is your wand, have no doubt of it, but please, if in the course of your education the second makes itself known to you, I should like very much to hear about it. Only to hear, only. Harry, who had learned to recognize a careful man when he met one, nodded. He bought the holly wand. He let the second wand stay in its case. On the way out of the shop he heard, he could not have sworn to it if anyone had asked, the faintest possible creak of wood against wood, as though very quietly the second wand had moved in its box, the way a cat stretches before it sleeps. On the night before the 1st of September, Harry lay on his back on the camp bed in Dudley's second bedroom. Aunt Petunia had moved him out of the cupboard the week the letters started arriving, less out of kindness than out of superstition, and he looked up at the ceiling and he tried, with the small, fierce part of himself that he did not usually let anyone see, to remember his mother's face. He did not succeed. He had never succeeded. He had a general impression of red hair and of a hand on the back of his head, and nothing else. He thought very quietly, without meaning to pray, if there is anyone at all who knew her, I would like one day to be told about her. Above him in the plaster of the ceiling, his own shadow put a hand up toward his shadow, and his shadow took it and held it for a moment and then let it go. He slept. The weather in his dreams that night said, for the first time in his life, a real word, soon. In the morning, Uncle Vernon drove him to King's Cross and dumped him at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 with the manner of a man returning a library book that had given him personal offense. Harry thanked him anyway. Uncle Vernon's neck went purple and he drove off. Harry turned to the pillar. He had no idea how to board a train that did not, according to any sign he could see, exist. Plump red-haired woman a few steps away was already shepherding a small crowd of redheads of descending heights, and she had already noticed him. "First time, dear," she said. She had the voice of a person who had solved this problem before and was not going to make a fuss about it. Harry liked her at once. "Yes," he said. "Ron's new too," she said, and nudged forward a tall, gangly, freckled boy in a jumper who managed to both wave at Harry and look murderous at his mother for introducing him. "Just walk straight at it between the 9th and 10th platforms. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous." Harry was not nervous. He did not tell her that. He pushed his trolley toward the barrier and at the last possible instant let his hand brush the brick, and the brick, which had felt under his fingertips like every other brick in the station, briefly felt instead like cold water. He stepped through. The station noise cut off and a different station noise began, older, steamier, enormous. A scarlet engine stood breathing in front of him. Owls screamed overhead. A small girl in pigtails was trying to wrestle a cat into a basket and laughing about it. Harry stood still for a moment, breathed in, and looked up. Above the engine, above the roof of the platform, above the steam, a single early star hung in a sky that was still half afternoon. It was the wrong time of day for a star. He looked at it. It looked, he felt quite clearly, back at him. He smiled for the second time in his life that he did not bother to hide. Then he pushed his trolley toward the train. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2 Platform of Shadow and Star. The Hogwarts Express was loud in the way only an engine can be loud, which is not the same as being noisy. It breathed. Harry pushed his trolley along the platform and watched the crowd from the small, clean distance he had, in 10 years of practice, perfected. Redheads like a family of flames, a woman weeping into a handkerchief while her daughter pretended not to be embarrassed about it. A cat balanced on a trunk, furious. A very tall third-year reading a book as he walked, colliding with and apologizing to 6 different first-years in succession without ever lifting his eyes. "Bit much, isn't it?" said the freckled boy Harry had come through the barrier with. His name, Harry had learned in the last 6 minutes, was Ron Weasley. He had a nose like a well-mapped hill and ears that went pink when he was trying not to show feeling. "Want to share a compartment?" "Yes," Harry said, because it was true, and because Ron had said it like it was a question he had been nervous to ask. They found an empty one toward the back. Harry lifted Ron's trunk onto the rack without meaning to, because it was in his way, and he had been lifting heavy things for Aunt Petunia for years, and his arms did not, in practice, know they were supposed to be the arms of an undersized 11-year-old. Ron watched with the very specific Weasley expression of a boy whose older brothers were watching him be impressed, inside his head, even when they were not there. Harry pretended not to see. At the compartment door, a pale girl with blonde hair so fair it was nearly white, and the distant, unhurried face of someone listening to a far-off piece of music, paused with her hand on the frame. She looked at Harry. She did not look at Ron. "The stars were waiting for you," she said politely. "I'm glad you came." Ron said, The girl said, "I'm Luna, the way one says a name that a person will, in the future, have reason to remember. My father publishes a magazine. You'll like it." "It isn't always wrong." She waved pleasantly at a child further down the train who was not waving at her, and she drifted on. Ron waited until she was well past. My brothers told me there'd be weird ones. I think I liked her, Harry said. Well, yeah, that's the weird bit. Ron threw himself into the window seat, realized he had thrown himself into the window seat, and tried to rearrange his limbs into the posture of a person who had sat down on purpose. Anyway, so what's your name? You haven't said yet. Harry had noticed this. He had been waiting to see how long Ron would leave it. Ron had left it 7 minutes, which was, by the standards Harry had begun to calibrate for this new world, a deeply polite length of time. Harry, he said. Ron blinked once, twice, and then visibly made a decision. All right, he said. Harry. That's a good name, nice short one, easy to shout in a corridor. Harry smiled properly for the third time in his life that he did not bother to hide. The trolley came by and Ron went pink at his corned beef sandwiches, and Harry, who had 3 gold coins too many and nobody to buy anything for, spent them in what he would later think of as his first small act of chosen family. He bought 4 of each thing on the trolley, and when Ron started to protest, Harry handed him a cauldron cake and said, without inflection, "You do it for me." Start now, and Ron, who had the great sense not to argue with a truth that had not yet been earned, took the cake and ate it. A bushy-haired girl knocked on the compartment door halfway through Somerset. Has anybody seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost one. Her voice was bossy the way only a girl who has been told she is bossy too often can make it bossy. No, Ron said. Wait, Harry said. He had heard something a moment ago, a small wet sound, the kind of sound a toad might make while hiding in the folds of a curtain. He got up, pulled back the curtain of their compartment, and a startled toad attempted to leap into his face. He caught it in midair without closing his eyes. He held it out. The girl's face went from bossy to impressed to bossy again in 3 seconds flat. Oh, well done. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Harry, Ron, pleased to meet you both. Have you been studying at all? I've read all of our set books, and also, she looked at Harry properly for the first time. She did not go pink. She did not go odd. She did, however, hold the toad a little more carefully, as though she had suddenly remembered that she was holding a thing that mattered to someone. And also a few of the others, but I'd be happy to go over things if you'd like. Yes, Harry said before Ron could say number. Hermione Granger smiled at him, and it was a real smile, not a bossy one. I'll come back once I've found Trevor's owner, she said. Don't change compartment. She didn't come back. She was caught by a prefect half an hour later and roped into helping with some crisis involving a flooded bathroom, but Harry, for the second time that day, had made a friend without planning to. Hogwarts came up out of the dark water of the Black Lake the way a story comes up out of a line in a book. They crossed in the little boats, 4 to a boat, and the half-giant who had brought Harry his letter stood at the prow of the leading boat with his lantern and his enormous wet beard. And as they rounded the last island, Harry stopped breathing for a few seconds, not out of wonder, but out of recognition. The castle looked from this angle exactly like the castle in one of his dreams. There was the tower on the left, there was the bridge. There was the one window that was, for reasons no architect had ever explained, a little bigger than the others and lit from within by candles you could not account for by counting the candles. Ron, next to him, said, "Blimey," quietly. Hermione, in the boat behind, said something that began, "Oh." And then Harry would find out later, closed her mouth, because Hermione Granger had learned in the previous 6 months that the world rewards composure. Luna, in a different boat entirely, said nothing and hummed. On the great hall's threshold, a very tall witch in a very tall hat stood waiting to speak to them. McGonagall, the name arrived in Harry's head before she gave it, although he could not have said how. She spoke briefly and well. She did not waste words. Harry liked her. The doors opened. The great hall opened with them. 4 long tables. A ceiling that was the sky itself, or a clever lie about the sky. Harry could not, standing there, be sure which. And under the ceiling 1,000 candles, and above the candles 1,000 slow silvery clouds. Ron made a sound like all the breath in his chest had decided at once to become one note. On a stool at the front of the hall sat a hat. The hat was old. The hat was the only object in the hall that did not look in some way ceremonial. It looked instead like a hat you had slept in because your tent had leaked. A seam along the brim opened. The hat began without preamble to sing. Harry did not listen to most of the song. He was watching the staff table. He had always, in the small, lean years of his life, watched the adults at the edges of rooms, because the adults at the edges of rooms were the ones who decided what was going to happen to you next. A very tall, very old man with a beard to his waist and a silver fringe of hair sat in the middle chair and smiled, in a general sort of way, at the room. His left hand rested on the table. His right hand under the table moved once, a small gesture, tap of 2 fingers, and Harry, because he had watched adults all his life, understood immediately that the gesture had been meant for him. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. Further down the table, a man in black with a very long nose and very dark hair watched the first years with the patience of a man watching weather through a window. As Harry's eyes passed over him, the man's eyes passed, briefly, only once, over Harry, and Harry felt, quite clearly, that he had just been weighed. Further down again, a small, nervous man in a purple turban sat very still. As Harry looked at him, the turban twitched, not the man, the turban. Harry looked away. "Potter, Harry," McGonagall said. He had not been paying attention. It turned out he was already at the front of the line. The hall made the small, embarrassed hush it always made for that name. Harry climbed the 3 steps to the stool and sat. McGonagall placed the hat on his head. The hat fell forward over his eyes, and the great hall, for him, went dark. "Ah," said the hat amiably in the small, private voice it used for sorting. "Hello," Harry thought, politely. The hat said. Then a beat later, differently, the cheerful curiosity of a craftsman who had thought he was going to install a door and has discovered that he is, in fact, going to install a gate. "Now that is, yes, I thought so. Well, this is going to be interesting, Mr. Potter, isn't it?" "Is it?" Harry thought. "There are 2 of you. No, don't misunderstand me. 1 boy, 1 voice, but a second voice underneath. Older, much older than me, and I am older than the school. Interesting, interesting, interesting." The hat made the mental equivalent of a person settling into a chair for a long conversation. "All right, plenty of courage, no shortage of it. Gryffindor would have you and be pleased. Plenty of loyalty too, once you give it, which you do not do quickly. Hufflepuff, not Slytherin, no, not because Slytherin would not serve you, but because you would not serve it, and the house knows. But the mind, Mr. Potter, the mind. You have a mind that listens, a mind that watches, a mind that wants to know, not to win. Yes, yes, I think so. And a second voice under it that is very, very hard to argue with." Harry, in the dark under the hat, felt a small cold pressure at the back of his head, as though a very large hand had, momentarily, rested there. "Permission," the hat said quietly. "Mother," it was not asking him. It was asking the other voice. The pressure lifted. Harry did not hear the answer. The hat did. The hat for a second made a sound that was, from a hat, something very close to a laugh. "Very well then, better be Ravenclaw." The Ravenclaw table erupted. Applause. A boy halfway down the bench whooping. A second-year girl banging her fork on the table. Harry, blinking in the sudden candlelight, climbed down off the stool and walked to them on legs that were doing their best. As he sat down on the bench, he glanced instinctively once up at the staff table. Dumbledore, because by now Harry knew his name, Dumbledore, it had assembled itself in his head somewhere between the door and the stool, was looking at him over his half-moon glasses with an expression Harry had not expected to see. Not surprise, not alarm, recognition in the specific way a man recognizes a book he last read 50 years ago and has been looking for ever since. Snape, next to him, was already looking elsewhere. Quirrell, further down, was not looking at all. Hermione Granger was sorted into Gryffindor. She looked at Harry across the hall as she went to her table briefly, and Harry lifted 1 finger off the tabletop at her, an acknowledgement in the language he had invented with his shadow in the cupboard. She gave a very small nod back. Their friendship, as it turned out, did not require a shared dormitory to exist. Ron went to Gryffindor. Harry, seeing it, reached out and patted the empty bench next to him, and a boy named Terry Boot, whom Harry would later come to like very much, slid into the seat and said, politely, "Budge up, Potter, will you?" And that was that. Harry was a Ravenclaw, and Ravenclaw had him. The Ravenclaw common room was a round, high room at the top of a tower, and you got in by answering a question to a bronze eagle knocker. Harry's first question the night he arrived was, "What has roots as nobody sees, is taller than trees, up it goes, and yet never grows?" "A mountain," Harry said before he had thought about it. He had for half a second seen one in his head, a mountain under a very dark sky, and the sky had in that moment felt like a mother. The eagle clicked its beak approvingly. The door opened. Inside, blue silk and bronze stars and a high ceiling painted with the night, and in the middle of the room a tall white marble statue of a woman in robes that Harry, because of all he had learned today, this was the thing that made him stop walking, recognized. She had a narrow, intelligent face, a diadem on her brow, a half-smile that was not entirely benevolent. Her eyes had been carved shut as though she were listening. A prefect, noticing Harry had stopped, said kindly, "Rowena Ravenclaw." "She's asleep," Harry said. "Well, yes, it's a sculpture, but we do like to say that. She's listening, we say." The prefect frowned briefly at the marble. "Most people don't notice." "Sorry," Harry said and moved on. That night in the dormitory, with 3 boys he had met an hour ago snoring softly around him, Harry lay on his back and looked up at the ceiling of his 4-poster bed, which was painted with a constellation he did not recognize. He thought again, without meaning to pray, "Thank you." He did not think he was thanking the bed. He slept. In the dream, which was not a dream he had had before, although the weather of it was the same weather, he stood barefoot on a long, smooth floor the color of a clean lake at midnight, and in front of him a throne was set up on a low dais, and on the throne a woman sat. She did not, in the dream, have a face yet. Not ready, she had hands though. One hand was on the arm of the throne, one hand, the palm open, rested in her lap. The palm was full of stars, not a symbol of stars, stars, he could count them. He counted 7. A seventh star, very small, detached itself from her palm and floated out across the air and came to rest briefly at his sternum and then went out as though it had been an ember that had finally cooled. Not yet, the weather said almost tenderly, "Be good, be careful. Be seen, child, I am not ashamed of you, I will not hide you. You will walk into your life with your own face." He woke. He sat up, he breathed in. The sternum of his chest was, for about 20 seconds after he woke, slightly warmer than the rest of him. Then the castle's breakfast bells rang, and a boy named Anthony Goldstein rolled off his bed in a tangle and said, "Oh, bloody," and dragged a sock out from under Harry's trunk, and the world was, again, the world. In the first week of classes, Harry learned several things. He learned that Professor McGonagall could turn a desk into a pig and back again without changing her expression, and that Harry could turn a matchstick silver on the first try, and that this was apparently unusual enough that McGonagall, as she moved on to the next row, paused at his desk for a fraction of a second longer than she had paused at anyone else's, and said in her completely level voice, "5 points to Ravenclaw, Potter," and moved on. He learned that charms was taught by a tiny man who stood on a stack of books to see over the lectern, and who, despite being small and cheerful, was, as far as Harry could tell, the single most powerful spellcaster any of the first years would see that term. His name was Flitwick. He was the head of Ravenclaw. He looked at Harry on the first day, looked at him again on the second day, and on the third day stopped him in the corridor and said pleasantly, "If you ever feel you're outpacing the set work, Mr. Potter, come to me. I believe in watering what is growing." He learned that herbology was mud and sunlight, and that he liked mud and sunlight. He learned that astronomy was an all-hour class on the tallest tower, taught at midnight from the observation deck, and that he was, without trying, better at astronomy than any of the 7th years. The charts he turned in on the first night were not just complete, they anticipated. When Professor Sinistra held his star chart up to a candle, the lines he had drawn for the next Thursday and the Thursday after that were exactly where the stars would be. Sinistra, who had been teaching at Hogwarts for 31 years, said very quietly, and put the chart into a special folder on her desk, and said very carefully to the class, "Excellent work, Ravenclaw, all of you. But please only predict the sky for which you have present data." And Harry, because he was learning already how to be himself in a room where being himself got noticed, nodded, and did not predict the sky again. He learned that defense against the dark arts was taught by Professor Quirrell, and that Professor Quirrell was afraid of his own classroom, and that Professor Quirrell's fear was not the fear of a man afraid of the dark arts, but the fear of a man afraid of something he was carrying. The smell of Quirrell's turban was, Ron said later, when they met up at lunch, garlic and vampires or something like that. The smell of Quirrell's turban, as far as Harry was concerned, was not garlic at all. It was a faint old pennyweight smell that Harry recognized from no memory he could place, and that the hair on the back of his neck recognized perfectly well, and that his shadow, when he walked back to the tower after Quirrell's first class, stepped around. On the second Friday of term, Harry stayed late in the library. He had not meant to. He had come to look up one reference about goblin silver for transfiguration and had found, 3 shelves above that reference, a book about naming conventions in Greek magic, and the book had been very quiet about being there and had nearly, Harry could have sworn this, pulled itself out of the shelf and fallen into his hand. He sat down at a small table at the back with the book and did not move for 4 hours. The book was not in English. The book was not, for long stretches, in any language he had been taught. The book was, however, willing to be read by him. He understood about a quarter of it. He understood, and this was the part that made the back of his neck tighten, the list of names near the middle. Erebus, the list said, Etha, Hemera, Hypnos, Thanatos, Moros, the Keres, Nemesis. There were more. At the top of the list, as though the list had been made by someone with a clear sense of hierarchy, one name stood alone. He read that name 3 times. He read it a 4th time. On the 4th time, the book's margins very briefly lifted, the way the pages of a book lift when a window somewhere has opened and the air has moved. There was no window in this part of the library. Harry closed the book. He did not put the book back on the shelf. He did not take it out either. He slid it very carefully into the back of the second-to-last shelf, with the spine turned in, where no one would find it again until he came back for it. Then he gathered his things and he went. It was late. The library was not emptying, it was already empty. Madame Pince was locking up somewhere near the front, muttering. Harry walked back along the third-floor corridor toward the Ravenclaw Tower. He did not take the corridor he had meant to take. The castle, because the castle was the castle, offered him a different one. Harry had been at Hogwarts long enough by now, 2 weeks, to understand that when the castle offered you a corridor you had not meant to take, you took it. The corridor he took was long and dusty and unlit, or rather it was unlit for almost everyone. Harry, who had not needed a candle in the dark since he was 8 years old, walked it comfortably. Halfway along, a door was ajar. A door had been ajar before him in his life a great many times. A door being ajar was, in Harry's experience, a door inviting a thing in. Usually the thing was Dudley. He had not usually gone through ajar doors. He went through this one because the ajar door was not offering itself to Dudley. The ajar door was offering itself to him. Behind it, an unused classroom. In the unused classroom, against the far wall, a mirror. The mirror was taller than a man. It was framed in gold. It had carved into the gold across the top of it a line of writing that Harry, without meaning to, read the right way around and the wrong way around at the same time and understood as the sentence it was pretending to be. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. Harry stood in the doorway. He did not cross to the mirror. Not yet. He understood, from the quiet little way the room was holding its breath, that this was a kind of room one did not rush. In the mirror at the far end of the glass, a woman stood. He could not see her face. He could see, very clearly, the shape of her. He could see the dark fall of her hair, which was the color of the air between stars. He could see one of her hands, which was down at her side. He could see above her shoulders the suggestion of other shapes, wings perhaps, or the long, slow cloaks of other siblings standing at her back, patient, waiting, not crowding her. He could see that she was looking at him. She did not, in the glass, smile. She raised her hand. She pressed the palm of that hand to her side of the mirror. Harry in the corridor did not yet cross the room. He lifted his own hand slowly, and across the space between the doorway and the glass, he pressed his palm forward into the empty air as though toward her. The mirror fogged briefly where her hand was, as though she had breathed on it from the inside. The fog, clearing, left behind one clear shape in the glass, a small crown of 7 stars set briefly in the reflection on the top of Harry's head. Then the mirror was just a mirror again, and Harry was just a boy standing in an empty classroom at 10 o'clock at night, and his heart was beating so hard he could hear it in the soles of his feet. He did not go in. Tonight was not the night. Tonight was the knocking on the door. He stepped back out into the corridor and closed the door softly behind him, footsteps about 20 feet off. Harry had time to flatten himself into an alcove and slow his breathing before the footsteps passed. 2 pairs. The first was quick and light and uneven, a man walking with a nervous tick at his left ankle. The second was smooth and very slow, and as the second pair of feet passed Harry's alcove, Harry felt, quite distinctly, a cold pressure along the length of his left side, as though someone had drawn a cold finger down his ribcage. He did not shiver. His shadow at his feet did. Must be before the feast, I told you. Quirrell, muttering, urgent. Too many teachers in the halls. Master, please. The second voice did not speak, or if it did, Harry did not hear its words. He only heard a sound like dry leaves dragged along stone. The footsteps turned the corner. Harry waited. Harry counted to 30. Harry counted to 60. Then he slipped out of the alcove and went the opposite way down the corridor, toward the nearest tapestry that would let him into the shortcut that would come out 2 floors above the Ravenclaw staircase. He did not look behind him. He did not have to. His shadow walked behind him without needing to be told. Halfway up the shortcut, a voice from above said, very softly, "Potter." He stopped. He knew the voice. He had heard it at the staff table. "Out of bed," Snape said, coming down the stairs, past the 3rd-floor curfew, and alone. Harry looked up. Snape was 3 steps above him, tall and black, his face pale in the stairwell's dim light. "Library, sir," Harry said, and held up, because he had the sense to, the books he had actually been carrying for 3 hours that evening. Lost track of time. Snape looked at the books. Snape looked at him. Snape looked for a fraction of a second past him at the air around him, the way Ollivander had looked at the case of the second wand. 5 points from Ravenclaw, Snape said evenly, for losing track of time. "Go to bed, Potter." "Yes, sir." Harry went. He did not look back. Halfway up the shortcut, he allowed himself, finally, to breathe. Dumbledore sent for him the next evening. Not by note, not by owl, a small, polite prefect knocked on the Ravenclaw common room door during prep and said, "Potter, the headmaster would like a word if it's convenient," and Harry, who understood if it's convenient in the mouth of a powerful man, went. The gargoyle guarding the headmaster's staircase said, "Sherbet lemon," politely, and stepped aside. Dumbledore's office was not what Harry had expected. He had expected, on the basis of the great hall and the general size of the man, some kind of vast throne room. He found instead a cluttered, cheerful round tower office, full of small instruments that chirruped and puffed, and at the far end a desk, and behind the desk a man, and on a perch behind the man a phoenix the color of a late afternoon. "Sit down, Harry," Dumbledore said. "Lemon drop, no thank you, sir." Harry sat. Dumbledore sat. The phoenix, whose name Harry already knew because the castle knew and the castle had told him, ruffled once and settled. "I will not keep you long," Dumbledore said. "I wanted only to welcome you and to say that if ever you feel, and I have a suspicion you may, that a teacher of this school is not a safe person to go to with a question, there is always at the gargoyle one password. That password tonight is sherbet lemon. The password will change, Harry, each day of your time at this school. You will always know what it is when you need it. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Dumbledore smiled, and it was a small, tired, kind smile, not a performance. "You look very much like your father. People keep saying that. Your mother, and you have her eyes. Your mother was remarkable, more remarkable, I suspect, than the world ever knew. Your mother, Harry, kept a book of correspondence with me for the last 3 years of her life. I have been thinking this week that it is time I opened that book at last." Harry sat very still. "I shall tell you what I find when I have found it," Dumbledore said. "Not before. A man should not run ahead of the facts." His blue eyes, over the half-moon glasses, rested very gently on Harry. "Your mother, the last time she wrote to me, said something I did not understand at the time. She said, 'Albus, if anything happens to me, please watch him. He will be more than you think.' I assumed she meant a small, soft gesture, the usual sort of more. I shall not now assume that." Harry did not speak. Dumbledore nodded to himself, as though closing an agreement with a colleague. "That is all for this evening, Harry. Thank you for coming. Sleep well." Harry stood. At the door he paused, with his hand on the frame. He did not know precisely why he turned back. He said, "Sir, if I were something more than you think if I were." He did not know how to end the sentence. He ended it badly. "Would it be a problem?" Dumbledore looked at him for a long, measured second. "Harry," he said, with a gentleness Harry was not prepared for, "it would never be a problem to me. It might be a problem to others. My office and this password are always yours." "Thank you, sir," Harry said and went. On the way back to the tower, he took the corridor with the unused classroom deliberately. He did not go into the room. He walked past the ajar door. He did not even look in. He knew the mirror was there. He knew he would come back. He also knew, and this was the lesson of the evening, and the lesson he would carry without losing it through the rest of the year, that wanting a thing too much was what let an enemy use the thing against you. He would come back in his own time, not tonight. He climbed the steps to the Ravenclaw Tower. The eagle knocker asked him its question, "What comes at the end of everything?" Harry thought about it. He thought about it for almost a minute. "A beginning," he said. The eagle clicked approvingly and opened the door. In the common room, under the marble woman whose eyes were carved shut as though listening, Terry Boot was slumped over a charms essay, and Luna Lovegood, who had, it turned out, been sorted just after Harry and had been sitting quite patiently in the best armchair by the fire ever since, looked up and smiled. "You met her," Luna said politely. "I'm glad." "Yes," Harry said. "Your stars came with you," she added. She pointed, without looking, at the ceiling. 7 of the painted stars above the common room were, tonight, a little brighter than the others. Harry, who had been counting, noticed. Nobody else, it seemed, did. He sat down by the fire. He opened a book. Under the floor of the common room, very far down, somewhere in the bones of the castle, a presence he did not yet have a name for shifted briefly the way a sleeping body shifts when it is dreaming of someone it loves. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The mother in the mirror. Harry did not go back to the mirror for 11 days. He had promised himself he would not. He had, beyond that, understood that the mirror was a thing he could become unable to stop looking at, and he had, at 10 years old, watched enough adults fall into their preferred small comforts: the gin bottle under the sink, the bingo slip, the magazine never read but always subscribed to have formed early a tidy dislike of being stopped. He did the work of the castle instead. He turned his matches silver. He read Hermione's essays before she submitted them, which she permitted once she realized he caught at least one thing each time, and she caught at least one thing in his each time. He went to the library for the goblin silver reference he had actually been trying to find the night he had met the mirror, found it, wrote his essay, put the essay in his bag. He did not, on his next 3 library visits, go near the shelf where he had left the Greek book with its spine turned in. He was not afraid of the book. He was polite to it. A book that had pulled itself halfway off a shelf on the night he walked by had done him a favor, and a boy who had been raised by Petunia Dursley knew that favors were things you received carefully and accepted openly, and did not, under any circumstance, ask a second one of too soon. On the 11th night he went back. He went because his shadow that evening on the Ravenclaw stair had begun, very faintly, to lean toward the third-floor corridor without waiting for him. It was the most insistent thing it had ever done. He noticed it twice between defense and dinner, and by the end of dinner he had accepted the appointment. The classroom was empty. The mirror was where it had been. He sat down on the floor in front of it with his back straight and his hands flat on his knees, the way he sat on the floor of the cupboard when he had needed, as a child, to think clearly. He waited. For a moment nothing happened. He saw himself in the glass, a small boy, too thin, messy hair, bright eyes, nose looking a little pinched as it always did when he was tired. Then at the edge of his own reflection, a second shape, the woman again standing where she had stood before, nearer tonight, near enough almost that he could see her face. I came back, Harry thought, not quite saying it, not quite sure if he had to say it. I never left, the weather said in the back of his skull, as it had said in every dream he had ever had. Child, is that what I'm supposed to call you? He said aloud, because some things wanted a voice. Not mother, not yet. I don't know you well enough for that. The woman in the glass inclined her head. She was being patient with him. Patience, he had discovered at the Dursleys, was the most generous thing power could offer powerlessness. He was almost undone by it. I will answer to any of my names. In his head her words arrived with their own small quiet weight, the way a large animal breathing near you settles a room. I have many, most are not for you. One is, tell me, Nix. He held the name in his mouth without saying it. He had read it in the book. He had seen it at the top of the list. He had not until this moment spoken it, because he had known, in the slow, careful way he had come to know things, that a name like that was a door, and you did not open a door unless you were willing to walk through it. Nix, he said aloud. The candles in the empty classroom did not go out. The flames, all of them, turned from yellow to the same deep cold blue the dusk gets when it is about to become a night, and then, a breath later, back to yellow. Nothing else in the room changed. He understood that the castle had just curtsied to someone. Sit with me, Nix said. I have not had my son an hour of my own in 10 years. He sat. She sat in the mirror and did not move closer and did not move away. She spoke to him over the space of the next hour in a voice like something between snow and a cello. She told him first the simple thing. His mother had wanted him more than any grief could have taken back, and his father had wanted him every bit as much, and they had gone to an island where people had very long ago gone to ask for help, and they had asked, and she had answered. James was his father. Nix was his mother. Lily was his mother also, and Lily's love was not less real for having been asked for. No child born of more than one love had ever, in Nix's long accounting, been less loved. She told him the rule. She was his mother, his father had been James. No third claim was permitted. No one may name you child who did not make you. She said the word name the way a blacksmith says the word iron. He understood her. She told him the cost lightly, not to frighten him, but so that he would know. The cost had been paid in part already by his mother on the nursery floor. The cost was not finished. There would be more. She did not lie to him. He liked her more because she did not lie to him. She told him last a very small thing. Your shadow is not your shadow. Your shadow is a sister of mine, kept small because you are small. She has counted for you. She has walked behind you. She has, more than once, lifted a blanket onto you when no one else was home. Thank her sometimes when you are alone. She likes to be thanked. Harry looked down at the empty classroom floor. His shadow lay there, the shape of a sitting boy, ordinary and with the faintest movement, a fraction of an inch, nothing his teachers could have graded as magic. It raised its hand at him once in greeting. Thank you, he said softly into the candlelight. The shadow, he thought, smiled. He was coming down from the astronomy tower 10 nights later, when a woman he had never seen before stopped him on the 5th-floor landing. She stood in the middle of the corridor with her arms folded as though she had been there for some time, and she wore a long traveling cloak and high black boots and a green so dark the eye took it for black until the torchlight caught it, and her hair was bound up in a kind of knotwork that Harry, who had spent a summer memorizing his aunt's macrame by accident, recognized as more complicated than it looked. Harry stopped. His shadow on the wall behind him went still. You're not late, the woman said pleasantly. Sorry, I've been sent. I am, for this hour, the divination mistress of your school. Professor Sinistra has very kindly gone to her bed. She smiled. Her smile was not entirely friendly. Her smile was, Harry perceived, the smile of a professional. Come with me, please, Mr. Potter. He followed her. It did not occur to him to refuse. The empty divination classroom on the 7th floor was warm in the way ovens are warm, and it was lit by a single pale lamp, and when she closed the door behind them, the door made a sound Harry had not heard a Hogwarts door make before, a soft, neat clink like a key turning. My name, she said, is Hecate. I expect you have read it this week in a book you tried not to ask for. Yes, Harry said calmly. I am a friend of your mother's, not an old friend. There are no old friends of your mother's. A recent one by the measure my sister takes of time. She crossed to a desk and did not sit behind it. She sat on it, one boot swinging. Your mother has asked me to do two things for you, Mr. Potter. I agreed to one. I shall tell you about the other. First, the one I agreed to. She reached into the pocket of her cloak and produced, on a thin silver chain, a small pale stone the color of a winter morning. She held it out. Put it on. What is it? A moonstone cut by a good friend of mine under the right moon. It will not make you invisible. It will not shield you. It will not, I am sorry, make you taller. It will, however, never lie to you. If you wear it and you ask it a yes or no question about a person standing in front of you, it will either warm or cool. Warm is yes. Cool is number. I have set it to 5 questions a day and no more because you are 11, and because at 11 the temptation to ask a stone whether a girl likes you is, in my professional opinion, overwhelming. Harry, who had not been planning to ask any stone that question and was offended, a little on principle, did not show it. He took the stone. He slipped the chain over his head. The stone settled at his sternum, exactly where the little 7th star had, in the dream the first night, touched his chest. Thank you, he said. Good. Hecate looked at him closely. The second thing your mother asked me to do I declined. She asked me to teach you the old arts. I will not. You are her son. You are my sister's son, but you are 11. You are at school. The school will teach you what it teaches. The life will teach you what it teaches. When you are older, Mr. Potter, and the school has done its work and the life has done its, and when you come to me and ask a second time, I will then consider it. Why not now? Because an apprentice of mine at your age would be a weapon, Mr. Potter, not a witch. Your mother did not have me teach you. Your mother had me watch you. I have watched you. You are, I am happy to report, exactly what she hoped. She smiled again, and this smile was a little warmer. You may ask the stone one question tonight by way of trying it. Here is the question I recommend. Is the man in the purple turban a friend to you? Harry lifted the stone. He had not yet opened his mouth. He did not need to. The stone was already cold. Hecate's face did not change. There, one question answered. I shall leave you now. The castle will return you to your tower. I am at the margin, Mr. Potter, should you need me. I am also, I should warn you, at the margin of your enemy, and the enemy has begun to know I am there. Be well. She walked out of the classroom. Harry, by some mechanism he would never quite understand, found himself, 3 seconds later, blinking in the corridor outside the Ravenclaw Tower, with the moonstone under his shirt and one more enemy on his ledger than he had had that morning. It's a 3-headed dog, Ron was saying, loud enough that Hermione shushed him. They were in a corner of the library, bent over a map of the castle. Fred and George had definitely not loaned Ron on purpose. 3 heads, Harry, on a trapdoor. They are guarding something. Obviously they're guarding something. That's what 3-headed dogs do. Someone tried to steal something from Gringotts, Hermione said, keeping her voice low. The day you went, Harry, you said Hagrid collected a package. You said Hagrid was very secretive about it. You said Hagrid was, quote, peaceful the way a man is peaceful about a thing that might bite him in the ankle. I did say that. And that same day, Gringotts' Vault 713 was broken into, which Hagrid had emptied that morning, which is in the Daily Prophet 3 weeks ago. She tapped the folded newspaper she had, for some reason, kept. Now there is a 3-headed dog sitting on a trapdoor on the 3rd-floor corridor, and the man in the purple turban is reading about the shape of bones in old altars, Harry said quietly, down in the restricted section in the afternoons when he should be in his office. You've seen him, twice. I go to the restricted section once a week now, not for that. Harry frowned at the map. I go for other things. He does not see me when I am there. I suspect he cannot. He did not tell them why. The 3 of them had, in any case, the rough and ready trust of children who had agreed not to ask each other about everything. Ron did not ask how Harry saw and was not seen. Hermione, who had noticed, had put it in the clear, clever, organized way of her own mind, in the column marked "Will ask when ready." So, Ron said, the stone, a philosopher's stone, Hermione said. Nicholas Flamels, they moved it here because Gringotts was attacked. The man in the turban is trying to steal it. And we are going to do what about it exactly, Ron said. Because I don't fancy, we are going to tell Dumbledore, Hermione said firmly, and if we have to, if we really have to, we will, Ron. Also make sure the stone does not reach the hands of the man in the turban. If we really have to, Ron repeated. He looked at Harry. You know, don't you, what's in him? In the turban, I have a suspicion, Harry said. Voldemort, Ron said. Hermione flinched at the name. Harry, who had never been taught the flinch, did not. He looked at Ron calmly. We'll tell Dumbledore, he said. We'll try to tell Dumbledore, but Dumbledore is not always in his office, I have noticed. He goes to the ministry more often than he used to. Someone right now is making sure he is not in his office very much at all. Which is a thing I think that we are supposed to notice, because if we did not notice it, he would not be letting it happen. Meaning what, Harry? Hermione said slowly. Meaning, Harry said that if the stone is taken, or if it nearly is taken, it will be on a night Dumbledore is at the ministry. And it will be our job, maybe, to make sure the stone is not taken. He has been watching us all year. He watches me. He knows what I am. Yes, Hermione, he knows. How do you know he knows? Because he told me in the first week that he would read the last letters my mother wrote him. He has. He would not say that to me if he did not intend to bring me into it. Ron said, "Does anything scare you, mate, anymore?" "Everything," Harry said mildly. "Let's go." The night the stone came was the night of the last Quidditch match of the season, which Ravenclaw was not playing in but which everyone watched because everyone watched, and it was the night Hagrid in the Three Broomsticks let slip to a stranger in a hooded cloak, without knowing the cloak was listening for it, that the way past the three-headed dog was to play it music. The stranger in the cloak, Harry later learned, was not a stranger. The stranger had a turban under his cloak. Harry's moonstone went cold during breakfast for no question he had asked. He looked down at it. It had never done that before. It was a warning. He had thanked Hecate already. He thanked her again now under his breath. "Tonight," he said to Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table low before the owls came. "Dumbledore will go to the ministry after the match. I can feel it. Meet me at 9, third floor corridor, left side, outside the statue of Boris the Bewildered." "How do you?" Ron started. "Because I asked the castle," Harry said. Ron decided again not to ask. At 9 o'clock he met them at the statue. They had the cloak Ron's, technically, lent by one of the twins, not the deathly kind of cloak, an ordinary enchanted travel cloak that smelled faintly of old socks. Hermione had a flute she had bought from a street vendor in Hogsmeade and had practiced 2 notes on. Harry had the moonstone. He had also the little Greek book from the library, which had this time come out of the shelf without pretending to be accidental, and which he had stopped at last, pretending to refuse. Past the door. Past the dog, Hermione's 2 notes were enough, because the dog was mostly asleep from somebody else's song already, which Harry did not like. Down through the devil's snare, Ron freed them with the herbology he had, in fact, listened to. Through the room of winged keys, Harry did not fly. He stood on the floor and watched the flight of the keys for 40 seconds and then reached up and plucked, out of the air, the one key that was behaving, for 1/2 second, differently from the others. The key protested. He turned it in the lock and the door opened. Through the chamber of chess, which Ron won with the kind of cheerful and mathematical cruelty Harry had not known Ron had in him, and the chess took its price and knocked Ron senseless, and Hermione went back with him and would not have gone back if Ron had not, at the last moment, said her name quite clearly. That left Harry. He went on alone. He was not surprised. He had understood from the breakfast cold of the moonstone that this was his part of the evening. Through the room of the troll, already unconscious, someone had done the work before him, and that someone was now beyond the next door. Through the room of the potions, the logic puzzle Hermione had solved over his shoulder in 10 seconds that morning, so that they had worked out together that the small bottle was the one to take. He drank it. He walked through the black fire. The chamber beyond had a mirror in it. Harry, for a fraction of a second, felt his heart lift. It was not the mirror from the corridor. It looked to the ordinary eye like the same mirror. It was not. The writing on the frame was the same lie about desire. He remembered suddenly and very clearly what Nyx had said in the corridor mirror. "I show not your face, but your heart's desire." She had said it to him in her way. She had said that frame is a liar, but the mirror does not have to be. Quirrell stood in front of the mirror. He was not wearing the turban. He had turned, and at the back of his head, through the thin ridge of hair, a second face looked out. The face was gray. The face's eyes were red. The face's lips moved. "Potter," said the face at the back of Quirrell's head, and its voice was the dry leaves sound Harry had heard in the corridor, only now with its words hearable. "Come in, Potter, come closer." Harry did not come closer. He stood in the doorway. He understood very quickly 3 things. 1, Quirrell could not get the stone out of the mirror. Quirrell was staring at the mirror with the expression of a man who had spent half an hour staring at the mirror and had not been able to make the mirror give up what he wanted. Quirrell wanted the stone. To get the stone, one had to want the stone without any other desire louder. Quirrell wanted also to live and to please his master and to not be killed by his master, and his master wanted immortality, and all of that desire was noise. 2, the mirror had been built for a particular kind of customer. Harry, who had stood in front of a different mirror with his mother in it only 10 nights ago, understood the test. A person who wanted the stone only to find it and not to use it could have it. Harry tonight did want to find it, specifically to deny it to the man at the back of Quirrell's head, and did not intend to use it. The mirror would eventually give it to him. It would not, however, give it to him while Quirrell stood between him and the glass. 3, the chamber was going to have to be dealt with in that order. "Come and see, Potter," the face at the back of Quirrell's head was still saying. "Come closer, closer, boy." Harry stepped in. He did not approach the mirror. He approached instead the small dark patch of floor at the edge of the mirror's pedestal where Quirrell's shadow, unattended, was thrown. Quirrell's shadow, Harry noticed, was not one shadow, it was two. A thin, nervous one that belonged to Quirrell. A second one, thicker, darker, squat, hunched along Quirrell's back into the place where the back of the head face was. Voldemort's shadow was, quite literally, a second passenger. Harry did not speak to Quirrell. He did not speak to Voldemort. He did not, in fact, speak at all. He did, however, make, with one small exhalation, a sound that was less a word than a pressure, the pressure Hecate's moonstone had made that morning at breakfast. He made it low in his chest. He made it so that his own shadow behind him would hear it. He made it so that Quirrell's shadow, both of Quirrell's shadows, would hear it too. His shadow heard. His shadow had, in fact, been waiting. Harry's shadow lifted itself off the floor. It crossed the chamber in perfect silence along the ground, a long dark ribbon, and it slid up Quirrell's back, and it took the darker of Quirrell's two shadows, Voldemort's shadow, by the wrists, and it pulled it, not out, not yet, but still. Quirrell's second face, which had been hissing more closely into Quirrell's ear, abruptly could not speak, because its second shadow was pinned against the wall behind it like a beetle under glass. Quirrell, who was physically still in control of his body, although not much of his will, screamed and turned around. Harry, because he had grown up as a small child with tall cousins, stepped aside. Quirrell lunged. Quirrell, because he could not think clearly without his master talking in his ear, lunged badly. He missed Harry by 3 inches. He hit the pedestal. He hit the pedestal hard. The mirror of Arist, for it was the mirror, tipped gently as a tall mirror tips, and Harry, because he was fast and because he had thought ahead, caught it with his forearm and set it upright again. Quirrell went down on his knees against the pedestal. His hands shook. Harry stepped behind him. "Stop," Harry said quietly, in a voice that had very much against his intention, quite a lot of his mother in it, both of his mothers. "Stop, please." Quirrell stopped, not because Harry had said please. Because Harry understood with a cold, small satisfaction, the room had stopped him. The room, being a room of this castle, belonged to an old order, and the old order was answering the ancient small word Harry had said. His body had remembered Greek before his mind had. He had said a word he did not consciously know. The back of the head face tried one last time to speak. It could not. It was being held against its will by a shadow that was older than it, and that shadow was holding it on behalf of the shadow of a boy, and the shadow of that boy was, although it had not, in any public way, admitted this yet, the daughter of the night itself. And then Voldemort's spirit, because Voldemort's spirit was clever, and because Voldemort's spirit had been doing this kind of emergency work for 10 years, did the one thing it could still do. It left. It tore out of Quirrell through the top of Quirrell's skull, a long dark smoke, and it went past Harry and past Harry's shadow and past the door and up the chimney of the chamber and out into the night. Quirrell was dead before he hit the floor. He did not die by any hand Harry could show to a teacher. He died because the thing that had been in his head had left and had taken, on the way out, the part of Quirrell that remembered to breathe. Harry looked down at him. Harry, who had never seen a dead body before, did not look away. He owed Quirrell that much, not the man who had tried to kill him, but the boy Quirrell had presumably once been, before someone older and crueler than he had climbed into the back of his head and eaten him. He also owed the moment an honest assessment. He had not saved Quirrell. He had not been able to. He had, however, driven the second passenger out of him before Voldemort had completed whatever he had meant to complete in this room. That was not nothing. He held that thought steady, like the small, warm stone against his sternum. Then he turned to the mirror. The mirror showed him himself now, looking tired. The mirror showed, behind him and a little to the left, a woman with an uncarved face and one hand resting gently at his shoulder without touching him. The mirror at the bottom of the frame, quite slowly, like a dog bringing its ball back, dropped a small blood-red stone onto the stone floor of the chamber, next to Harry's foot. Harry did not pick it up. He stepped away from it and back to the door, and waited there until Albus Dumbledore walked into the room, 2 minutes later, with a face that was old in a way Harry had not yet seen it old. "Thank you, Harry," Dumbledore said very quietly in the hospital wing 2 mornings later, after Madame Pomfrey had bustled out with a bad grace and a worse tray. "For the stone, for Quirrell, for the part of the evening I was not permitted to witness. Sir, and I am sorry," Dumbledore said, "that it was you. It was going to be me." "Yes, it was." Dumbledore's blue eyes were softer than Harry had yet seen them. "Your mother asked me to tell you something on the day it became necessary. I will tell it to you now. You are a child of 2 mothers, Harry, and no one may take either from you. You are also, and this is my part, my student. I am not your father. I am not your guardian in the sense your father would have been. I am your headmaster. I will be your headmaster for 7 years. In that time I shall try every day to deserve that. Yes, sir. May I ask you, and you may of course decline, whether you will allow me from time to time to speak to your mother on your behalf?" Harry thought about it for longer than Dumbledore had expected. Then he said carefully, "Yes, when you need to, not on little things." I'd like to keep the little things for me, sir. Of course." Dumbledore almost smiled, almost. "The little things are the whole point." He stood. At the door of the hospital wing he paused and looked back and said, not quite lightly, but with a care Harry would later remember, "I had a friend once, Harry, long ago, who wanted a very great thing very badly. He did not get it. He got other things instead. I have been reflecting on him this week, on what he would have done tonight with the stone. I believe you did exactly what he would not have done." Harry did not ask who the friend was. He understood that Dumbledore had gently told him something without telling it to him, and that this was part of how Dumbledore would speak to him, now and for 7 years, and that Harry's job in return was to listen. "Yes, sir," he said. Dumbledore went. Ron and Hermione came in 15 minutes later. Ron had a large bruise on his jaw and a great many chocolate frogs in his pockets. Hermione had brought a book and a great many concerns. They sat on either side of Harry's bed and they did not ask him, yet, what had happened in the last chamber, because they had, between them, already decided not to, and Harry loved them both so completely in that moment that he had to look at the ceiling for half a minute. Luna from the door of the wing said, "Your shadow is tired, let her sleep a day." She said it without coming in, then she went. Madame Pomfrey, passing a second later, said, "Who was that?" And no one in the end could quite explain, and Harry, lying on his back, closed his eyes, and under his ribs, on the small chain at his sternum, the moonstone warmed slightly. Yes, a small yes, an unasked yes, as though approving of a question it had not been asked. Above the castle, somewhere over the west towers, a single evening star came out 20 minutes earlier than the almanac had predicted, and stayed out. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The night has 10,000 children. Privet Drive in July had the color of pale bread, and the smell of petunia planting, and the sound of lawnmowers the way other streets had church bells. Harry came back to it at the end of his first year, the way a boy comes back to a house he has been told is home without ever having believed it. Petunia Dursley let him in through the back door with the expression of a woman opening a letter she did not want to read. "You're taller," she said, "a bit. You eat more now, I suppose." "I eat ordinary amounts, Aunt Petunia." She looked at him for a long second. Her mouth did a thing it had been doing more often as the year went on, a thing Harry, with his year of better food, better sleep, better company, was only now learning to read. She was afraid of him. She was also, he thought, afraid for him. He had not before known the difference between those two fears. Petunia Dursley did not have an art for explaining herself. She had an art for shutting doors. "Your cupboard's been cleaned out," she said. "You'll have the second bedroom." "Thank you. Don't thank me." She turned away. "And if those owls start arriving through the kitchen window, I'll ask them to come through the attic window. There's a gap in the frame." Petunia stopped. "How did you know?" "I climbed up there once." She did not ask why. She did not ask when. She turned the tap on in the sink with a great show of having more important things to do, and she washed 3 cups that were not dirty. Harry went up the stairs. The second bedroom, which had been a room for Dudley's broken things, had been cleared out in a hurry in the last month. Petunia had been careful to keep the worst of the wreckage, but she had put a bed in it, and a lamp, and a little desk that had a cigarette burn in the corner from a decade ago, and he unpacked his trunk without comment and let Hedwig out of the cage to stretch her wings toward the attic window, which she did, and then folded herself back into his hand. "Later tonight," he told her. "Trust me," she clicked her beak at him. She trusted him. That evening, after the Dursleys had gone to bed, he climbed the stairs to the landing, reached up for the hatch, pulled down the folding ladder, and went into the attic. He had, in fact, been up here once before. He had been 7. He had been looking for a ball he had thrown over the banister. He had not looked carefully. He had been afraid of being found. Tonight he was not afraid of being found. Vernon snored through a wall 3 feet thick. Petunia, although she would lie awake for most of the night, would not get up, because Petunia did not want to see. The attic had 2 small round windows and a great deal of Christmas. Tinsel in a box, a plastic tree in 3 pieces. A set of angels someone had overprayed the pink off of. And in the corner, under a heavy old quilt, Harry did not at first recognize a crate. He pulled the quilt off. The crate was wooden and old. The crate had on its lid, in a hand Harry had never seen but recognized immediately, the single word Lily. He sat down on the attic floor in front of it, and he did not open it for a full minute. He gave himself the minute. He had learned to give himself the minute. He had learned this year that a person who could not give himself the minute would make bad decisions the rest of the day. Then he opened it. Inside the crate, a stack of letters tied in blue ribbon, a pressed flower that had been a marigold once and had, over 20 years, gone the color of a tea stain, a small tin of milk chocolate that Harry did not eat and did not throw away, a photograph in a silver frame of a laughing red-haired girl of 17 with her arm around a laughing black-haired boy of 17 in which the laughter moved, a pair of reading glasses with a crack in the left lens, and at the very bottom, a journal. He opened the journal. He read for 2 hours by the light of his own small, steady shadow, which had raised itself gently against the attic wall as though to hold the book for him. Most of the journal was ordinary. It was his mother's ordinary. She had been, he learned, a woman who liked lists. She had written down her grocery lists and her jokes to remember lists and the names of her patients at the small magical hospice in Devon where she had volunteered. She had also, and this was the reason the journal had been hidden in an attic under a quilt under Christmas, kept a quiet column on the left-hand pages of every entry, in a hand slightly smaller than her usual hand, in a dried-out ink that was a little more black than the rest. In that column on many pages she had written the word Nix, sometimes only the word, sometimes a short note. Nix, I have asked Albus nothing. He would try to fix it. This is not his to fix. Nix, the sign finished forming last night on the inside of my wrist. I hid it from James. He is not ready. I am not ready. We are together not ready, which is more ready than I have been in my life. Nix, the bean is here. The bean is our boy. The bean kicks like a wizard and sleeps like the moon. Nix, they are coming. We will not leave. To run is to lead them to others. If I die, hold him. He is not a sacrifice. He is a son. The last entry was dated in his mother's hand, the day before Halloween 1981. He read it without breathing. Then he breathed and closed the book and sat with it on his lap for a long time, and he did not cry, because he was not the kind of boy who cried when he was alone, but he understood something for the first time about his mother, which was that she had not been one thing only. She had been 2 women at once, and she had gone to her death standing in both of them, and she had named him carefully in both. Thank you, he thought up through the attic roof, toward no one in particular. Thank you for her. The ordinary stars over Little Winging, which had been very busy that night with airplanes and streetlights, did not answer him. The stars beyond the airplanes, which he had been learning to listen for, did. They did not speak, they lined. He understood. He brought the journal down to his bedroom at 2 in the morning, and he hid it behind the loose board of the floor that he had in his second day back already found. The crate he closed and left in the attic. He did not want Petunia in 20 years to know that he had known what had been up there. That was a gift he would not take from her. She would, in 20 years, still need to think that she had kept a secret from him. That, for Petunia, was a thing more precious than almost any real thing. He went to bed. He woke not in his bed. He woke because a hand, long-fingered, cool, smelling vaguely of lavender in the inside of a warm library, had pressed itself politely over his mouth. Don't, a lazy voice said above him, scream. You'll wake the muggle, and then I'll have to sing the muggle back to sleep, and honestly, brother, I have done a long day. Harry threw the hand, said, good lad. The hand lifted. A tall, thin figure in a long gray cloak sat on the edge of Harry's bed. It had a face like something between a handsome man and a sleeping cat. Its eyes were half-lidded in a way that was not rude, but that suggested it had not, in some considerable time, found a reason to fully open them. I'm Hypnos, it said. I'd shake your hand, but shaking a hand while this tired is a stretch for me, and our mother has asked me not to waste energy on courtesies. Up you get. Up where? Out. Hypnos yawned politely behind his knuckles. It was an enormous yawn. It lasted, Harry timed, 7 seconds, and during those 7 seconds Harry felt inside his head the almost irresistible urge to yawn too, and fought it and won. Hypnos, noticing, grinned sleepily. Oh, I like you. Most of my half-brothers yawn. Come on. Where are we going? Hecates, not for long, an hour of the world, a month of the night. Harry sat up. He pulled his glasses on. He pulled his trousers on and a shirt, and after a moment his moonstone. He pulled his shoes on last because he had learned in year 1 to put shoes on last because shoes were what you needed if you had to run. Well, Aunt Petunia, notice you gone. Number I am her for tonight. Hypnos winked slowly. A polite shade of her. It will iron the kitchen and weep in the hall and be very cross about nothing. She'll think she had a bad dream in the morning. Please don't hurt her. Hypnos looked at him, actually opened his eyes for a fraction of a second, and in that fraction of a second Harry understood that Hypnos could hurt, that Hypnos was not merely sleep but the large soft cousin of something worse, that a brother who offered laziness also offered, somewhere under the offer, a very serious thing. Then Hypnos's eyes closed again and the world untightened. I would not hurt our aunt, brother. I am above all things a gentleman. He rose. He held out his hand. Now. Harry took his hand. The attic above them went upside down for one breath, and then the bed went upside down, and then Harry, Hypnos, and the space 3 inches in front of the bed were all folding together into a small, neat absence. They arrived somewhere cool and green and tall. Hecate's tower was neither in Britain nor outside it. The door opened off a garden that smelled of thyme, and the tower itself had been built of a pale stone that was whiter than moonlight but did not hurt the eyes, and the stairs that went up inside the tower did not at any point seem to end. They climbed for what felt like an hour. Harry, who had hiked up 4 floors of Hogwarts, was not tired. Hypnos, who had climbed 3 flights and was complaining, was exhausted. Next time, Hypnos muttered, "We take the door that skips the stair. I swear she leaves this stair up to annoy me." "Hello, Mr. Potter," Hecate said from a room at the top that had no door on their way in but a door behind them as they entered. She had been sitting at a desk with a bowl of water in front of her. The bowl was still. She looked up. She smiled. Her smile was warmer than it had been in the divination classroom. "Not by much, but by enough. Welcome, I see you have met your brother." "We're brothers," Harry said. "Half," Hypnos said. "Different fathers. Our mother is our mother." "Yes, hello, Hecate." "I need tea. I need a lot of tea. I climbed all the steps. You did this on purpose." "I did not. The tower does it on its own. Sit down." Harry sat. Hypnos, yawning, draped himself over a low couch by the window and looked immediately like he had been there for years. Hecate waved a hand. 3 cups of tea arrived from the air. A 4th, smaller, arrived for the cat Harry had not, until that second, noticed on the windowsill. "Your mother," Hecate said, "cannot raise you. You know this. She has asked me to lend you, when we can, the bones of a teaching, an hour at a time, perhaps twice a summer. Not formal, not an apprenticeship, a visit. Tonight is your first. Tonight we will do 2 things. We will speak about your enemy, who is not idle, and we will do a small practice with your gift." "Yes, yes, ma'am." "Good." Hecate put her cup down. "Your enemy is currently in Albania in the body of a snake, which is the largest body he has managed to colonize since he left Quirinus Quirrell. He is reading, through the eyes of a human accomplice he has charmed into his service, a book written in 1303 by a hedge witch in Burgundy who had done some very poor, very original research into what we call the older things. He has grasped in a broad way that primordial blood exists and that it is in the world, and that you are the most available vessel of it. He does not yet know that you are Nyx's. He thinks you are, at worst, a lingering remnant of the oath your mother made in her dying minute. He is looking for you the wrong way round. This is good. We will not correct him." "Yes, ma'am." "He will, in this school year, attempt to move back toward a body of his own. He has, in his time, made a small number of, how shall I put it, banked selves. Dumbledore is already looking for them. I tell you this so that you do not interfere when he acts oddly about it. Let him do his work. You will do yours." "Yes, ma'am. In the meantime," Hecate rose. She crossed to him. She put one finger under his chin and she tilted his face up and she looked at him, and her eyes, which had been, a moment ago, a very pale green, were up close, not eyes at all. They were 2 narrow corridors. They went a long way back. They had at the far ends of them light, but not any kind of light Harry had names for yet. "We are going to practice," she said, "keeping your gift small. Small, you will, without practice, grow into it wildly. Wildly is dangerous. Wildly is what your enemy is hoping for. Wildly makes noise. Wildly tells him where you are." She let his chin go. "Tonight you will practice holding a flame only as small as a candle, not a torch, not a bonfire, not the thing in the forest that eats a forest. A candle, understand? I think so. Good, go to the window." He went. The window opened onto a balcony, and the balcony opened onto a night full of stars that were not the stars he had seen over Godric's Hollow, or over Little Winging, or over Hogwarts. They were fewer, they were larger, they were closer. Hecate pointed down at the floor of the balcony. Harry's shadow, cast by the starlight, stretched long across the stone. "Ask her for 1 spark," Hecate said. "1, no more. Polite, you have manners." "I have manners," Harry agreed. He looked at his shadow. He said, "Please, a 1. A single small spot of dark, not darker than the shadow, but denser, the way the pupil of an eye is denser than the iris, detached itself from the shadow's shoulder and rose up into Harry's palm. It had no weight, it had very clearly attention, it was looking at him. "Good," Hecate said, "now let it go. Back to her, anywhere." Harry opened his hand. The spark, considering, rose. It went out across the balcony. It touched, very delicately, the top of a clay pot where a small basil plant had been trying, all summer, to die without making a fuss. The spark settled into the soil. The basil plant, which had lost the war in June, unrolled 3 small leaves in the next second, put up a flower and lived. "Ah," Hypnos said from the couch, without opening his eyes. "He's a healer when he's small, interesting." "Useful," Hecate said, pleased. "Again, Mr. Potter, 100 times please, 1 spark at a time, small, polite, kind. If any of them wants to be rude to a plant, send it back. We are making a habit." They practiced. They practiced for what felt, to Harry, like 2 hours, and was, by the window's count of starlight, 1. At the end of it, Hypnos, who had moved, over the course of the lesson, from the couch to a cushion on the floor to, eventually, the low balcony rail where he dozed with his knees drawn up, yawned enormously and said, "Mother asks a question, brother." Yes, she asks whether when you are older you would like a sword. Harry, who had been about to say no because he was a practical child, considered. I think maybe, what kind? The kind, said Hypnos, opening his eyes for a long, serious second, that belongs to our other brother. His name is Thanatos. He is less fun than I am. He does a serious job. When a boy of our mother's is given a sword by Thanatos, the sword is given for a reason. The reason is usually not that he intends to use it. The reason is that a sword in Thanatos' hand is a promise between him and her, and a sword passed to a son is that promise redoubled. Do you understand? Yes, Harry said. He did. He was not proud of understanding so young. He understood anyway. Good, Hypnos said. It will come to you when it needs to come to you. You will not have to go looking for it. Our mother is economical. Hecate at the desk said dryly. She is also fond of dramatic timing. That too. They went home. He stood up a month later as Hecate's tower counted it, and an hour later as Privet Drive counted it, in his bedroom in Little Winging, with Hedwig on his shoulder and a basil plant he did not remember asking for on his desk. On the pillow beside his own was a small black feather. He picked it up. It was not from Hedwig. It was, he could tell, from the slow way it lay against his palm, from an older bird. Nix had visited while he had been away. Nix had checked on his bed. He put the feather in the floorboard beside his mother's journal. I love you, he thought, upward, politely. Good night. The ordinary stars over Little Winging for once told him good night back. The Burrow in August. Ron's brothers, Fred and George, already writing him fan mail by owl from the Burrow and addressing it to the boy who is much more pleasant than Percy. Ginny Weasley, who was 11, looking at Harry across a kitchen, going pink and trying to hide it by asking him, gruffly, whether he wanted jam. The Diagon Alley visit in which Harry met Lucius Malfoy, and in which Lucius Malfoy, with a small practiced sleight of hand Harry did not catch at the time, slipped into Ginny Weasley's cauldron a small black book that he had been waiting for 12 years to be rid of. Harry felt, as Lucius passed him, the moonstone go so cold against his sternum that it flinched like a living thing. He did not know yet what the cold was for. He filed it. He would remember it later, September. The train. The platform that Ron and Harry, in a small, very embarrassing private moment neither would ever explain to anyone, missed because Ron had forgotten a trunk latch and Harry had waited for him with the patience of a boy who owed his friend more than one favor, and they had looked up to see the barrier briefly turn to stone. Ron's father's car, which Ron's father had enchanted to fly, and which Ron's older brothers had very much not been supposed to know about. The flight, the Whomping Willow. The night in the hospital wing with a black eye on one side of Harry's face and a black eye on one side of Ron's. McGonagall delivering a detention that was also, Harry thought afterward, a favor. You will spend a month of Saturdays helping Professor Sinistra inventory the astronomy archives. Do not make me regret this choice, Potter. He did not make her regret it. He found in the astronomy archives a folio of star charts made in 1690 by a witch who had at the time been writing in the margins in a very tiny hand, precisely the sort of essay on the primordials that Hecate had forbidden Harry to read, and which Harry in good faith did not read. He also found, which he did read, a series of charts of the night sky at Godric's Hollow on October 31, 1981, and he understood looking at them that the sky had bent that night, and that someone with Professor Sinistra's access had in the last month been looking for precisely the same charts and had not found them, because they were buried on page 400 of a folio no one but Harry had touched in 3 centuries. He filed that too. Then the walls began to write on themselves. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Harry standing in a corridor on the night of the first message, with Ron next to him and Hermione 10 feet off frowning at the paint, was less interested in the writing than in the cat. Mrs. Norris, hanging from the torch bracket, was not dead. The rest of the school thought she was dead. Harry, standing 10 feet off with a pair of green eyes that saw very well in the dark, could see that she was breathing. A breath every 15 seconds, very small, very slow. She's petrified, he said quietly to Hermione. Not dead, how can you tell? I can see her breathe. Hermione, who had learned by now that Harry sometimes saw differently, did not press. Then it's a basilisk. And said, it's a what? A basilisk, Gorgon Medusa spawn giant snake. Its direct gaze kills. An indirect gaze through a reflection, through a puddle, through a cat's eyes petrifies. No one has actually died yet, have they? Just frozen. That's because the basilisk is being cautious, or someone is. Someone, Harry said, someone is. You know who? I think so. I don't think I know how he got in here, but I think I know who he was when he was at this school, and I think I know what he is now. I would like, Hermione, if you don't mind, to spend the weekend in the library. She said, of course. That weekend, in a back issue of the Hogwarts yearbook dated 1945, Hermione found a boy named Tom Marvolo Riddle, head boy, who had received a special award for services to the school on the night the Chamber of Secrets had apparently been closed. She circled the name with a pencil. She did not put the name into words in the library. She wrote it on a scrap of paper. She passed the scrap to Harry. Harry read it. Harry nodded once. Harry ate the paper. Ginny Weasley began in the second month of term to look pale. Not sick pale, worse than sick pale. Harry, who watched the Weasley table at meals out of the corner of his eye because Ron had not stopped being Ron just because Harry had not been sorted with him, noticed her pushing her plate away 3 days in a row. He noticed her absent from dinner the night the fourth message appeared on the wall. He noticed at breakfast the next morning that Ginny's fingers around her teacup were faintly stained with ink she had not been writing homework in. He walked over to the Gryffindor table and he said very softly, "Ginny, may I see the book you've been writing in, please?" Ginny looked at him. Her eyes, for a fraction of a second, were not her own. Then they were hers again and she went white and she ran. He did not chase her. He did not need to. He knew now what he was looking for and what it was made of. He went to Dumbledore. Dumbledore was not in his office. Dumbledore, on the worst possible night, had been called away by the Board of Governors, engineered, Harry suspected, by Lucius Malfoy, a subplot Harry had watched unfold over 6 weeks. McGonagall was also gone. Snape, nominally in charge, was in his own office with the door locked, brewing something. Filch was in the staff room. The castle was, for a window of about 3 hours, effectively unsupervised. Now Harry thought, he's going now. He ran. He ran with his shadow running ahead of him for the first time since Privet Drive without waiting for him. He ran for the second-floor girls' bathroom. Hermione and Ron were already there. Hermione, with the quick, clear, clever thinking that was her glory, had already deduced the entrance. Ron, with the loyalty that was his, was standing with his wand out. "She's down there," Hermione said. "Ginny, and him, he's the diary wrote back to her all year, Harry," and she wrote, and, "Yes, open it." Hermione opened it. They went down. The Chamber of Secrets was a very long hall full of water that did not move, and the water did not move because the walls of the chamber did not want the water to move, and Harry, walking down the middle of the hall, felt distinctly that the hall was older than the rest of the school. A great deal older. He respected it. He walked along the middle. He did not because he had been raised by Aunt Petunia and had manners even when trespassing. Splash. At the far end, Ginny Weasley lay on a step in front of a statue taller than a house. Over her, with the lazy, proud face of a young man pleased with a trick, stood Tom Marvolo Riddle, roughly 16, translucent in clit, in a uniform Harry did not recognize but recognized anyway. "Harry Potter," said the half-ghost pleasantly. "At last, she has been telling me about you for weeks. She has been quite useful. I shall be sorry to have finished with her." Ron, in the long hall behind Harry, made a soft, furious, grieving sound. Hermione put a hand on his arm. They did not come closer. They knew, by now, when to stay back. "She isn't finished," Harry said calmly, moving forward because he had calculated in roughly 2 seconds that Ginny was breathing slightly, every 18 seconds, which was longer than Mrs. Norris but not dead. "And I don't think you are either. You are a shard," Riddle smiled. "I am considerably more than a shard. You are a shard. You are a shard of a boy who thought he was not a boy. You are running on Ginny Weasley's year. You have been feeding on her year. You think in about 3 minutes you will have fed enough to become a body. You will not. You will not, because the thing you're trying to pour into is, I'm sorry to tell you this, not a cup that fits you." Oh, Riddle's smile, a little brittle, did not go. "And what would fit me, Potter?" "Nothing," Harry said, "because you don't really fit yourself." Riddle's smile went. Ginny on the step made a small sound. She was fading. Harry had perhaps 90 seconds. He had known coming in he had perhaps 90 seconds. He had come in anyway. He said very calmly, "Also, Tom, there is something you haven't noticed. The basilisk is here." Riddle hissed a word in Parseltongue. Which was bad Parseltongue, actually. Harry, to his own surprise, understood it, a command for the serpent in the statue to come out. Harry, also to his own surprise, spoke Parseltongue back. He did not mean to. It came out of him, he said in the same language. "Wait." The basilisk, emerging from the mouth of the statue, stopped. Riddle said sharply, "What? I am not him," Harry said in Parseltongue to the basilisk. "I am older than he is. I am older than both of you. Be still." The basilisk was still. Riddle, because Riddle was clever, and because Riddle had for 1,000 years of his personal reckoning been Voldemort, and because Voldemort was, among many other things, a man who understood at last that he was losing, did the one thing left. He flung himself at Ginny, not physically, because he was a shade, but by pulling the rest of her year out of her in one great rush to fill himself. Harry, because his shadow had run ahead of him for the first time, was already in position. The Sorting Hat had been on the floor beside him for the last 10 seconds. He did not remember it arriving. Fawkes, who had 2 minutes ago flown in on a tide of feathers and tears for Ginny's sleeping face and healed the scratch Harry had not even noticed on his own wrist from the entrance, had brought it. Harry afterward would not be able to reconstruct which instinct had put his hand in the hat first, but he put his hand in the hat, and what came out was a sword. The sword was heavier than a boy should have been able to lift. Harry lifted it. The hilt was warm in his palm, and set into the crossguard, half hidden among the gold leaf, was a small dark line, a sigil carved in a hand he did not know, a short horizontal mark with a curl on either end, and when Harry looked at that mark his throat tightened because he knew instantly and without explanation whose mark it was. Oh, he thought with a feeling almost like laughter. So this is the sword, brother. He did not use the sword on Riddle. He did not have to. He used it because he had to on the basilisk, which against its will moved again at Riddle's hiss, which, because it was old, and because it was already weighing the older voice it had just heard in Harry, moved slower than it could have. He drove the sword with one small upward strike into the roof of its mouth. A fang broke off in his shoulder. He did not notice. He lifted the sword out. The basilisk fell. And Riddle, on the step pouring himself into Ginny, felt, without knowing why, that the pouring had reversed. It had. Harry behind him had plucked one of the fangs from the basilisk's broken jaw and had driven that fang without ceremony through the open book under Riddle's foot. Ink erupted. Riddle screamed a high, ugly scream Harry would dream of later on bad nights. Riddle dissolved. Ginny on the step drew a long, wet breath. Harry dropped to his knees beside her and held her hand until she opened her eyes. "Harry," she said, small. "Yes. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. Let's go home." The sword, he thought in a language he had only heard twice in his life, from a lazy half-brother on a couch. "Thank you, brother." The sword did not answer. The sword was a sword. But the small sigil on the crossguard under his thumb was warm. He picked Ginny up. Ron, a second later, was there and took her other arm. Hermione, a second after that, was on the other side and had her wand out for the lift, and they all together walked the long hall back, and Fawkes led them up on a beat of long red wings. In the headmaster's office a very late hour later, with Ginny asleep in the hospital wing and Ron and Hermione asleep in the chairs by her bed and Fawkes asleep on his perch, Dumbledore sat behind his desk and did not say anything for some time. Then he said gently, "He has been hiding himself, Harry, in vessels. I have known for some years. There are more. I have been until this week working on the problem alone. I should perhaps not work on it alone." Harry said, "Yes, sir." Dumbledore considered him a long moment. "The sword came to you." "It came to me, sir. I did not know it would. I knew who marked it." Harry did not explain further. He did not have to. Dumbledore's eyes on him went slightly brighter, a brightness Harry had not seen in them before, and that Harry would later understand was what it looked like when Albus Dumbledore felt, for a moment, less alone in a long problem. Then Dumbledore said, "We have older help than I had dared to hope. Thank your brother, Harry, when you see him." "Yes, sir." "And ask him when you see him whether he knows of 7. I think 7, Harry. I am not yet certain. I shall show you in good time the work. I shall not, I promise you, do this alone again." Harry stood. At the door he paused. He said, "Sir, there are defaced altars in Cumbria." Dumbledore's face did not change. "How do you know?" "The moonstone warms when I ask it. It warmed this morning before breakfast. I did not know what it warmed about until Hecate wrote." "Hecate?" "Yes, sir." Dumbledore, for a fraction of a second, closed his eyes. When he opened them he looked, Harry thought, a little younger. "I do not deserve this much help," he said very quietly. "I shall try to." Harry, because he liked the old man, said, "You deserve it, sir, but it's all right, you don't have to." He went to bed. On the floor of his dormitory, small and patient, his shadow had set itself up in a rectangle exactly the shape of his bed, as if holding the sheets for him. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The Doom of Kings. The summer before Harry's 3rd year was the summer of the dreams, not the ordinary dreams. Harry had grown used by now to the ordinary dreams, the hill by the water, the hand with 7 stars in it, the cold, patient attention of a mother who counted him at the end of each day the way a shepherdess counts her flock. Those dreams were domestic. Those dreams had become, in the small, ruthless honesty of his own life, the best part of his day. The summer before his 3rd year, a new dreamer started talking to him. The new dreamer was a man. The new dreamer was in a cold cell. The new dreamer was lying on his back on a stone floor and had not had a proper bath in 12 years and was laughing very quietly to himself and had a face Harry knew from a photograph in his mother's crate. Sirius Black, of the Mad Wedding Photo grin, the best man at his parents' wedding, the godfather he had been told on page 1 of a modern history of wizarding Britain, had betrayed his parents and was being kept in a tower surrounded by the worst creatures Britain had. Harry did not in the dreams approach him. Sirius did not in the dreams know Harry was there. Sirius was laughing about, as far as Harry could tell, a joke he was trying not to forget. The joke involved a man Sirius called Wormtail and a pub that had not existed since 1977, and Sirius was laughing because, and this was the part Harry listened to, Sirius had just in the dream worked out that Wormtail was alive and somewhere, and that Sirius needed to go and find him because Sirius was, in the dream and in fact, going to do that. Harry woke from those dreams each time with the cool, strange certainty that the man he was dreaming was not guilty of anything except laughter. He also woke with an understanding of what his shadow had been, all this time not quite telling him. An oath Nix had told him in the mirror could not be broken by a third party. No one may name you who did not make you. James Potter had named Sirius Black his brother. Nix had blessed that oath when she blessed James's line. Sirius, by that blessing, could not be taken from Harry, not by a cousin's curse, not by a Dementor's breath, not by 12 years of Azkaban. That was why the Dementors could not find him the way they found others. That was why from Azkaban, Sirius had one night simply walked out. Harry did not tell the Ministry. Year 3 came in a tilt of rain that did not stop, and a defense teacher who was thin and gray and gentle, and at the start of term, not to be underestimated. Professor Lupin taught them in the second week the Patronus charm, which was unusual for third years, but which, given the Dementors posted along the station platforms and sometimes outrageously in the corridors of the school, Dumbledore had made him teach. Harry on the train in September had been the first person that year to meet a Dementor. It had come into his compartment in the gloom of afternoon. Ron and Hermione had stopped breathing. Ginny, 2 doors down, had fainted. Harry, who had felt, as the Dementor entered, exactly the pressure he had felt from Quirrell's second shadow in the final chamber of the Philosopher's Stone, had done nothing quick. He had simply stopped it. He had not cast a Patronus. He had not, in fact, lifted his wand. He had looked at the Dementor as it came through the door, and he had said, politely in the same language he had spoken to the Basilisk, "Number." The Dementor had stopped. The Dementor had hung in the air for a long second and then had, for reasons it could not have articulated and Harry did not press, turned around and gone back out, and had not, in the rest of the year, come anywhere near him. Lupin, who had been, Harry later found out, coming down the corridor at that exact moment with a chocolate bar in his hand, ready to cast a Patronus for the class, had stopped too. He had for a fraction of a second looked at Harry with an expression Harry had by then seen on several adults and was learning to dislike. Recognition, paired with the will to pretend the recognition had not happened. "Mr. Potter," Lupin had said quietly, later that evening in the deserted Dada classroom, "I will not ask you how you did that. I will ask you to learn the Patronus charm anyway. There will be times in the years you are with me when speaking will not be enough. A Patronus is a thing you do not have to explain." Harry, because Lupin was his father's friend, and because Harry had decided on the train that he trusted Lupin, said, "Yes, sir," and learned the Patronus charm in 11 days. His Patronus was a stag. He did not tell anyone when he cast the Patronus for Lupin and saw what came out of his wand that there had been for a fraction of a second shape beside the stag. A dark, slim-legged horse, a mare that had come and gone faster than his eye could keep. Lupin had seen the stag only. He had wept quietly and said, "Yes, oh Harry, yes." The mare came, Harry eventually understood, out of the second wand, the one in the case in Ollivander's shop, the one with the nightmare hair. The wand had not come with him because he had not asked for it. The wand was still on the shelf in Ollivander's shop. The wand was waiting. He did not, that year, go back for it. Sirius Black found him on a Thursday evening in October at the fringe of the Forbidden Forest. Harry had been out alone because alone was the one thing he was not truly alone when he did, and because he had felt the great black dog at the edge of the grounds for 2 days, the way he felt anyone who loved him when they came close, and he had known, at last, that it was time. The dog was thin. The dog had in its ribcage the outline of a man. The dog came up to him with its ears down and its tail low, and Harry sat down on the wet pine needles and said, and his voice cracked, which he had not expected, "Sirius." The dog became a man. Sirius Black on the forest floor looked at Harry. Sirius Black's eyes in the faint light went very clear and very wet and very hungry, not for food, not even for freedom. For Harry understood in a kind of low humming shock his father, for a boy Sirius had not seen in 12 years. For a boy who Sirius had, on the last day of his life as a free man, sworn to raise. "You look like him," Sirius said. His voice was rough from not being used. "Oh God, pup, you look just like him." Harry did not say anything. He did not have to. He understood with the small honesty he had that this was one of the 2 or 3 moments in his life he would remember at the end. He leaned forward and he put his arms around the man who was his godfather and had gone mad in a stone cell for loving his father, and Sirius, who had not been held by anyone in 12 years, held him back. "I did not kill them," Sirius said into his hair after a long time. I did not do it, Harry, I know. Wormtail, I know, Harry said. Peter Pettigrew, he's at the Weasleys, he's Ron's rat. Sirius, for a fraction of a second, thought Harry was mad. Then Sirius realized Harry wasn't, and Sirius, who had been planning for 12 years to hunt a very clever rat across a whole country, made a sound that was half grief and half a terrible kind of laugh and said, "Of course he is." They did not catch Pettigrew that night. Pettigrew was clever and had 12 years of rat instincts. They did not catch him the next week, either. They caught him eventually at the end of May, in a corner of an empty corridor, Harry's shadow at last, cornering a small, scuttling gray thing and holding it down, and Pettigrew transformed and confessed and was taken to the ministry under restraint, and Sirius Black was, in the middle of June, cleared of all charges, with a small formal apology from Minister Fudge and a payment in gold Sirius did not want. Sirius moved into a house on Grimmauld Place. Harry, for the first time in his life, had a room of his own in a home that belonged to a man who wanted him. He stayed there for a week that summer. Then he went back to Privet Drive because Dumbledore had asked him to, and because Harry had learned by now to pick his fights. Morrows came to him once that year. It was in a dream Harry would never entirely describe. He was standing in a field. 3 strands of thread crossed the field, 1 red, 1 gold, 1 black, and they were being tied together slowly by a tall, thin man whose face Harry could not see. The man was fair. The man had in one hand the ends of all 3 threads, in the other hand a pair of shears. The man did not speak. The man worked. Harry watched. After some time the man set down the shears, and the threads were knotted in a way Harry had never seen thread knotted, and Harry understood, looking at the knot, that he had been shown a year. "Who are you?" Harry asked in the dream. The man, without looking up, said, "Morrows, Doom, yes, I am not here to frighten you. Our mother does not believe in frightening her children. I am here to tell you what I know. A ritual will be sown around you across the coming year. Do not resist it. You cannot resist it. You can, however," and his finger touched very gently the red thread, "prepare for it to cost you less than it will cost him, your enemy." Morrows, in the dream, looked up at last. Had a face older than Harry was prepared to see on a brother. He had very sad eyes. Harry nodded to him. Morrows nodded back. "Be kind to yourself, brother," Morrows said. "A year of fate does not mean you are not free." Harry woke. For a long time he lay still with his eyes on the ceiling, and he thought with the cold practical clarity he had now for 3 years been cultivating. "All right, a year of fate. I will not refuse it. I will make it cost him more than me." He got up. It was September. The train was in 2 days. He had packing to do. He tried, at the start of 4th year, to give Dumbledore the warning. Dumbledore, who had by now grown used to being told things by Harry and to telling Harry things in return, listened attentively. "A ritual," Dumbledore said, "across the year." "Yes, sir, my brother Morrows came to me in a dream. He does not send false visions." "No," Dumbledore said, "he does not." He looked for a long second out of the window of his office. "Do you know the ritual's purpose? To give him a body, sir, to make the body out of me." "Ah," Dumbledore said softly. "I had hoped I had more years before that. I've had a thought, sir. If I cannot prevent it, and Morrows said I cannot, may I dilute it? At the moment of the ritual, when he takes what he takes from me, if I do not resist, but also do not withhold, I think there is a chance some of my mother may, without his knowing, slip through. Make the body contaminated from his point of view, from ours useful." Dumbledore looked at him a long moment. "You have been thinking about this for some time. All summer, sir, and you came to me instead of to Hecate." "Hecate has already told me, sir, that the decision is mine." "I came to you because it is my decision, but I should like a witness for it. In case it does not work, I want you to know I tried." Dumbledore closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Not pretend they were not," he said quietly. "Thank you, Harry. I am honored to be that witness. I will stand ready. I will also, and I should perhaps have done this years ago, begin to prepare the country for the war you and I both know is coming." "Yes, sir. Do not, under any circumstance, go into the ritual alone. You will be alone in the moment of it. You will not be alone afterward. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Dumbledore put his hand briefly on Harry's. His hand was thin and warm and old. "Be clever and be kind to yourself." Harry, who had heard that second sentence very recently in a very different voice, swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," he said. The Triwizard Tournament came to Hogwarts in October. The Goblet of Fire lit on October 31st. The Goblet of Fire that night produced 4 names where the binding magic of the Goblet of Fire should have produced 3. The 4th name was Harry's. Harry, standing up in the front of the Great Hall under several thousand staring eyes, did not react. He did not try to explain. He had rehearsed the not reacting for 6 weeks. He walked politely to the room at the back of the hall. He stood in the room. He answered the several adults who asked him several loud questions with the same 3 phrases. "I did not enter my name. I have no theory as to how it was entered. I shall compete." The adults, all except Dumbledore, went mad about it for about 20 minutes. Dumbledore waited out the 20 minutes with the patience of a man who had already agreed in private that Harry would compete and that he would compete with the full help of the school and then some. Moody, the new defense teacher, the ex-Auror, the retired paranoid, watched Harry across the room with the steady expression of a man who had just watched a small piece of his plan go exactly right. Harry, who had noticed this, filed it. His moonstone at his sternum was the coldest it had been in 3 years. The moonstone did not lie to him. He did not, that evening or any evening after, allow himself to believe that Moody was Moody. He flew. He flew because Morrows had told him to prepare for the ritual to cost less than the ritual would have cost him if he had not prepared. For the first task, a horntail. Harry, who had now been inside the shape of the shadow spell for 3 years without anyone outside a very small circle of people ever noticing him use it, did not use it for the horntail, because the horntail was a dragon and Harry was, by now, a boy of strong instincts, and one of those instincts was that his shadowcraft was his last resort and not his first. He summoned his broom. He flew. He got the egg. He let himself be applauded. He did not permit himself even once to enjoy it. For the second task, an underwater problem. He had, because he had not been nerfed by 3 years of polite exposition, thought of 4 ways to breathe underwater. He chose gillyweed. He did not choose the shadow trick he had invented for fun in the cupboard when he was 8 years old of letting his lungs go cool for a full minute at a time, because the shadow trick was a last resort. He dove. He found Ron. He stayed under against the rules to bring up the small silver girl. He was informed incorrectly was not his problem, because the small silver girl was Fleur de Lacquer's little sister and Fleur de Lacquer had failed. He surfaced with 2 hostages. He was penalized in points and given a medal for valor by the Beauxbatons delegation. He did not care about the points. Between the second and third tasks, Barty Crouch Sr., the man Harry's moonstone had gone warm around once in November. A worm that Harry had at the time not understood was found dead at the edge of the forbidden forest. Moody was in the castle. The thing in Moody's flask had been drunk that morning by the thing Moody was not. For the third task, a maze, Harry went in. He came out in a graveyard. He had been expecting it. The graveyard was old and narrow and the grass was up past his knees, and in the middle of it a cauldron stood on a fire that was lit as cleanly as though the fire had been waiting for him for a month, which it had. Cedric Diggory stood next to him for a fraction of a second. Harry, who had made a decision about Cedric at the moment they had touched the cup together, which was that he would not let Cedric die, said immediately to Cedric, "Get behind me. Do not draw your wand unless I say. There is a man in the grass to our left. Do not look at him." Cedric, who was brave and who was also that year a little in love with Harry's steadiness, did as Harry said. The man in the grass was Wormtail. Wormtail had something small in his arms wrapped in a blanket. Wormtail put the small thing in the cauldron. The small thing hissed. Wormtail came fastidiously toward Harry. Wormtail raised his wand. Harry, and this was the point of the night, the place where he had been training for months, did not move. "Don't resist," Morrows had said. "Prepare." He let Wormtail bind him to a headstone. He let Wormtail cut his forearm neatly with a silver blade. He did not, in the moment of the cutting, flinch. He let the blood fall into the cauldron. He felt, as the blood fell, a small warmth on the inside of his forearm where, a long time ago, his mother had once drawn a sign in beeswax. He did something then he had been rehearsing in dreams for months. He did not pray. He did not command. He did not, in the moment, do anything that would be visible to Wormtail or to the thing in the cauldron. He merely, and this was the part Hecate had approved and Morrows had instructed, and even Thanatos, in one cold blue cameo 2 weeks ago, had given him a small nod about, opened, inwardly, the one tiny door inside his chest that he had kept shut for 3 years. He said inside, quietly, "Mother." A drop, a drop. He felt in his own blood 1 drop of her blood go in with his. 1 drop, not more. The cauldron went up in a column of a color. Wormtail, who was watching it, did not have a name for. A normal spectator would have said blue. Harry, who had spent 3 years learning his own palette, would have said the color was the particular blue the dusk gets 5 minutes after sunset. Nyx's color. Not at the time enough of it to notice. The thing in the cauldron rose. It had a body. It was roughly Voldemort. It was thinner than it should have been. It looked, for a fraction of a second, like a man who had expected soup and got broth. It did not understand why. It did not yet realize. It would realize weeks from now. For now it was merely hungry and angry and alive again and in possession of its own 2 hands. Voldemort stretched those hands out. Voldemort touched his own face. Voldemort laughed. Wormtail, weeping, came to him with the robe. Wormtail dressed him. Wormtail cut off his own left hand in a thank offering because he had been instructed to, and a silver hand grew from the stump, and Wormtail wept and thanked Voldemort for letting him. Harry, tied to the stone, watched. He watched without moving because he had learned years ago that making yourself small was how you lived. He also watched because he wanted to see very clearly the man he had just shortchanged. Voldemort, satisfied with his own hand, turned to him. "Now, Harry Potter," Voldemort said, "let me look at you." He walked across the grass. He was tall, he was pale, his eyes were red, his skin was up close like the skin of a toad. He put a finger under Harry's chin. He tilted Harry's face up. "Ah," he said, "green eyes, yes, we have met, haven't we, you and I?" "Yes," Harry said calmly. "I shall kill you in a moment. First we shall have a word. I am afraid I have been rude. I have not gathered my friends, dear me." Wormtail the Mark, Wormtail, cradling his silver hand, did the thing. The sky above the cauldron filled with the black, slow-turning skull. Figures began one by one to appear. Harry, watching, did not struggle at the stone. He had planned for this. He counted 40 seconds, 50. He had 50. Voldemort assembled his Death Eaters. Voldemort spoke to them in a voice Harry had not heard from him before, an older, tireder, angrier voice than Harry had heard from the shade in the chamber. Voldemort gave his speech. Harry at the stone listened. Harry at the stone was also, with the small, patient movements of a boy who had lived in cupboards, working the bonds of his arm, not with magic but with the simple fact of his wrist, which was narrow, and the rope, which had been tied by a weeping rat. He got his right hand free on Voldemort's 12th sentence. He did not cry out. He did not move. He kept the hand at his side. He waited. Voldemort finished his speech. Voldemort turned. Voldemort came toward him. Voldemort cut the other ropes himself, with a gentleness that was worse than a blade, because the gentleness was the gentleness of a man who intended to give Harry the dignity of a duel before killing him. "Bow, Harry," Voldemort said. Harry, 10 feet from him, did not bow. Harry, 10 feet from him, with the right hand he had freed before anyone thought to watch it through, he did not throw a spell. Spells are loud and spells are traceable, and spells, against a man who had dueled for a century, would take more than 40 seconds of rehearsal. Harry threw a fang, a basilisk fang. He had carried one in the inside pocket of his robe since the start of term, wrapped in silk, not because he had known what he would need it for, but because his moonstone had in August warmed when he had picked it up and warmed again when he had packed it. He had learned to listen. The fang hit Voldemort in the right shoulder. Voldemort, who had not had a body for 13 years and had not in 13 years been used to the sensation of pain, staggered. Voldemort dropped his wand. The Death Eaters, in a ring around them, did not know for a full second whether to step in. A full second was all Harry needed. Harry was already moving. Harry reached Cedric. Harry grabbed Cedric by the sleeve. Harry grabbed with his other hand the Triwizard Cup from where he had thrown it in the grass an hour ago. He took Cedric. He took the cup. He did not take Wormtail. He did not take Voldemort. He did not kill the Death Eaters. He was 14 and tactically outnumbered and out. The portkey took. Seconds later, in the middle of the Quidditch pitch at Hogwarts, under a sky that knew him, Harry landed in the grass with Cedric alive beside him, and a fang in his pocket that no longer had poison on it, and a sword he had not needed tonight, and one moonstone at his sternum that, he noticed only when Cedric sat up, dazed but breathing, had in the last 2 minutes cracked straight across the middle. Cracked, not broken. A thin line of cold, pale light through the stone. He lay in the grass for about 5 seconds, which was a gift he gave himself. Then he sat up and began to shout for Dumbledore. The Ministry denied it. Cornelius Fudge, who had many reasons not to believe Harry and one very good reason to believe him, his own moonstone, which he did not wear but which would, in his desk drawer, have gone stone cold at breakfast, chose the many. The Ministry's line within 3 days was that Harry Potter had gone mad. Cedric Diggory, who had been there, who had seen every second of it, stood up in the Daily Prophet's office the week after and said, quite clearly, "Harry Potter saved my life in that graveyard." Voldemort returned. "I watched it happen. Print what you like. I stand with him." Cedric's testimony to the Ministry was a problem. The Ministry, by the end of August, had buried Cedric's testimony under other news. The Ministry had made Cedric publicly a deluded hero worshipper. Cedric, to his credit, did not stop saying what he had seen. Harry wrote Cedric a letter in the first week of July that he did not send because he did not know at 14 how to thank a boy for keeping his name clean. He kept the letter. He would, decades later, give it to Cedric in person. Tonight, he put it in the floorboard beside his mother's journal and the small black feather. In the first week of August, Hecate came to him in a dream. She was sitting on the windowsill of Hecate's tower. It was day in the dream, which was unusual. She had a cup of tea. She looked at him across the dream with the plain, unembarrassed affection of a professional woman who had, in 13 years, learned to like a boy. "You did well," she said. "I cracked your pendant. I know, I don't mind. It will mend. It will mend slowly, but it will mend. Will it mend enough for what? For what's coming?" She sipped her tea. She looked at him seriously then. "Harry," she said, "you have reached the age at which I must ask you a proper question." Your mother has not asked it of you. I asked her to let me ask. She has this once allowed it. So listen." He listened. "You have at this point 3 lives you may choose to live. You may be a mortal boy. You may quietly set your gift down. You may let your brothers and sisters do the war for you, and you may live a long, kind human life and marry a woman and have children who will never know what you are, and you will be safe, and you will be small, and your mother will love you still, and this is an honorable thing. Or you may be a divine boy. You may come at 17 to the Isle of Night and take the second name, the true name, the one your mother has not yet spoken in your hearing. You will stop being Harry Potter in any meaningful way. You will, in time, become one of us. You will be powerful. You will also be lonely, because what we are lonely for is simply the mortal life. This is not a bad path. Some of your siblings have taken it. It is honorable." Or she set her teacup down. "You may be both. You may hold both at once. You may not set the gift down, and you may not take the full name. You may live a mortal life inside a divine body for as long as the mortal life will hold. This is the path Hemera took. This is the path 1 or 2 of my own students have taken. It is the hardest of the 3. It is the most costly. It is, I think, and I say this with no authority except my own taste, the most beautiful. But it costs, Harry. It costs a pendant and a friend and sometimes more. Will you choose now?" He thought for a long time. "All 3, he said slowly. "In turn, mortal boy, for the school years I have left, both during the war, then one day if I live through the war, whichever of the last 2 calls me hardest." Hecate looked at him. "That is not, Mr. Potter," she said gently, "one of the options. I know. I shall, with your mother's permission, allow it anyway." She smiled at him. It was the warmest smile he had ever seen on her. "You are very much your mother's son, both of your mothers." The dream folded. He woke. Dumbledore asked him in the first week of September in his 5th year whether he would be willing to begin, in earnest, what the Order of the Phoenix was politely calling the work. Harry said yes. Harry did not hesitate. Harry had been waiting since he was 12. The cracked moonstone under his shirt was warm. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The Crown of Night. The war began, as wars do, in the paperwork. The Ministry, through the autumn of 5th year, sent a toad to Hogwarts. Her name was Dolores Umbridge, and she wore pink, and she owned 14 plates with kittens on them, and she had the distinctive cruelty of a person who had at some point stopped being able to tell the difference between an order and a kindness. She was, to all appearances, a minor functionary. She was, Harry realized in the 2nd week, a man's plan given a human face. The man was Cornelius Fudge. The plan was to keep Hogwarts polite while a war waited for it. Harry, who had, after 5 years of being watched, stopped expecting to be allowed to stay quiet, did not stay quiet. He taught. The Defense Association started in a girl's bathroom and ended in the Room of Requirement, which opened for them on a Thursday in October, and taught Harry. The first time he used it, something about the castle he had not known. The castle had been waiting all along to be useful. Hogwarts was a creature, and it had sided with him. He had not asked, he had not needed to ask. He taught Patronus charms, shield charms, the disarming spell at a level the 3rd years were not supposed to know, and a small number of older charms out of a book Hecate had sent to him by Owl with a note that read, in a hand like small orderly moonlight, "These will not be on any exam. They will save someone's life. Teach them." He taught them. Nobody on the staff noticed except Snape, who pretended he had not noticed, and Dumbledore, who did notice and said nothing except in the corridor one morning, "The castle is humming, Harry. The castle only hums when it is pleased." Harry, who had not known Dumbledore, could, in a few words, say a whole blessing, nodded, and did not cry. Umbridge did not win that year. Umbridge never, in any year Harry had, won anything at all. She caused harm. She scarred the back of his right hand with her little black quill because Harry had refused, 3 days in a row, to write the words "I must not tell lies." He wrote instead, "I must not fail my mother." The first time he wrote it, Umbridge had tried to lean over his shoulder to see. She had felt, as she bent, a cold, small pressure at the small of her back that she could not explain, and had sat abruptly back down, and had not looked at Harry's parchment again. The scar healed slowly. The scar, like the crack in his moonstone, did not go away. Harry, who understood by now that some marks were honest, did not mind. Sirius died in June. There is no clever way to tell that, and Harry, years later, would not try. They had been lured to the Department of Mysteries by a vision Voldemort had planted in Harry that was meant to feel like one of Harry's true dreams, and did not, because Harry's true dreams did not smell of wet stone, and the one in question did. Harry had, in the moment, gone anyway, because Morrows had told him 2 years ago that not all fate could be resisted, and because the alternative to going and being wrong was staying and being wrong. Harry had taken 5 friends with him. 4 came back. They had been 6 children in the circular room of doors. They had been 5, Luna, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Harry 6. They had broken the prophecy. They had fought for a time competently. Harry had, because he was Harry, laid a shadow trap in the last room that caught 3 Death Eaters like a hand closing around 3 coins, and they had nearly, very nearly won. Bellatrix Lestrange came down the stairs. Sirius, who had been laughing the way Sirius laughed when he was home at last, did not see her wand come up. He was laughing. Harry saw her wand come up. Harry was already moving before Sirius was hit. Harry was not fast enough. Sirius died at the veil. He did not fall into the veil, which Harry would learn more about later, did not take him. Sirius died on the stone 2 feet in front of the veil, of a green curse from a woman who had been his cousin when they were small. Harry did not pursue Bellatrix up the stairs. He did. He had, for a fraction of a second, intended to. He had reached the foot of the stairs. He had felt in that fraction of a second a heat in him he did not recognize, a heat that was not his mother's and not Lily's and not his, a heat that was just a boy's. He had in that fraction of a second thought very clearly, if I go up these stairs, I will be a boy who goes upstairs to kill my cousin for killing my godfather, and I will not be Harry, and I will not come back. Harry dropped the heat. He caught Bellatrix by her shadow instead at the top of the stairs in the silence of a breath, and he held her there. He did not crush her. He did not hurt her. He held her the way one holds a spider in a glass until the adult in the room comes to remove it. And Dumbledore, who had arrived, because Dumbledore always arrived at the last possible moment, a habit Harry had come to understand was the deliberate choice of a man who believed in his student's competence, walked past him and took her off his hands. At the veil, Lupin was holding Sirius's body, and weeping in the particular quiet way only Lupin wept, which was not very loud at all. Harry went to Sirius. He knelt. He put his hand on Sirius's chest. He did not cry. The crying would come later at 2 in the morning, 3 nights later in a dormitory in Grimmauld Place, into Hermione Granger's shoulder, and he would give himself that. Tonight he put his hand on Sirius's chest and he said quietly, "Brother, you are not alone." He did not mean to say it. It came out of him. It came out of him, he realized a second later, in Parseltongue, which was, he understood now, not the language of Slytherin's line, not truly, but an older language his mother had in her dominion and had given him to use with the other old things of the world when the need arose. The shadow at the veil, of which there was a great deal, stirred. A tall figure that had not been there a moment ago was there. Harry knew him. He had not seen him in person before. He had seen him once in a dream, very blue, looking at Harry from a long way off. Thanatos. Thanatos did not speak. Thanatos knelt at Sirius's other side. Thanatos put a hand, a very long hand, on Sirius's brow. Thanatos closed Sirius's eyes. Thanatos looked at Harry, and Thanatos, of all of Nyx's children, Thanatos, who does not, as a rule, share warmth, nodded to Harry as one brother nods to another. "He is mine now, brother," Thanatos said, quiet as a breath. "I will be kind." "Thank you," Harry said in the same silent language. Thanatos rose. Thanatos lifted Sirius in a way that did not, to any observer in the room, visibly lift Sirius at all, and carried Sirius out of the hall. What Lupin was holding was only a body afterward. Harry understood, and understood that no one else in the room but Dumbledore, who had been watching, had seen it. Dumbledore found him in the corridor outside. Dumbledore did not try to speak. Dumbledore put his arm around Harry and held him for a minute against his chest, an old man made of warm wool and 1,000 books, smelling of sherbet lemon, and Harry let him. That was all the grief he allowed himself in public. It was enough to get him home. Summer at Grimmauld Place. Harry in Sirius's old room. The room was a mess. The room smelled of Sirius faintly, and Harry did not clean it. Harry lived in it as it was. Remus came by every other day. Tonks came by twice. Harry, who had decided already not to mourn as though he had only lost and not as though he had also been loved, set up on Sirius's desk the photograph of his parents at 17. He set up on the same desk a small black feather. He set up on the same desk the broken chain of Hecate's cracked moonstone, which she had, by owl, reworked with a little clasp so Harry could keep it even while the stone healed. He ate, he read, he practiced. He practiced, in particular, one thing. Hecate had, at the start of summer, sent a second note which said, "Tell your shadow she need not be small anymore. You are 15, the war has begun, let her grow when she asks." He had at the beginning been afraid to. He had, by the 1st of August, allowed it. He did not grow the gift wildly. He was still Hecate's pupil in spirit, but he let the gift widen the way a horse is allowed onto a larger paddock. 7, Dumbledore had said 2 years ago, 7 banked selves. The Horcrux hunt, they did not yet call it, but the name would come. Dumbledore had located 3. The diary Harry had destroyed. A ring at the gaunt shack Dumbledore had destroyed over the summer before 5th year at the cost of his right hand, which was now, beneath its glove, not a hand any more but the memory of one. a locket which Regulus Black had stolen and Creature had kept, which Harry and Ron found in the parlor cupboard at Grimmauld the first week of August. 4 more, a cup, a diadem, a snake, a person. They did not yet know that the last one was Harry. Harry, who had felt all summer the low second heart at the back of his skull, the part of him that did not quite belong to him, suspected. He told Dumbledore. Dumbledore closed his eyes. Dumbledore said, "I believe you may be right." Then Harry said, "I shall have to do something about it. In time. Yes, sir, in time. Not alone, Harry. No, sir." 6th year flickers in Harry's memory, as 3 long exposures and a great many short ones. The long exposures. Slughorn's potions classroom, and the memory they extracted from him. The 2 nights of Dumbledore leaving the castle with Harry to destroy the cup and the diadem in a hidden cave and a hidden room of the school, respectively. Both of them burning so cold Harry would dream of them for a year. And the night at the end of June on the astronomy tower, where Dumbledore, wandless, held to the railing and looked at Draco Malfoy, and told Draco Malfoy that he had been brave and had been used and was not beyond help. Dumbledore died with his wand in his other hand and a kind look in his eyes. Snape cast the curse. Snape had to. Snape had been instructed to. Harry on the tower below could not see the top of the tower. Harry could see its shadow on the grass. Harry saw in the shadow Dumbledore die. Harry saw Snape speak the spell. Harry saw, and this was the part Harry did not tell anyone for a long time, Dumbledore's hand in the moment of the green light close on Snape's sleeve as if to say, "Thank you, old friend." Harry did not then hate Snape. He did not know yet the why. He sat on the grass below the tower in the long minute after, and his shadow around him trembled. He said to his shadow very gently, "Sister, I'm all right, hush." The shadow hushed. Snape left Hogwarts alone ahead of the dark mark. Snape, Harry would later understand, went to Voldemort with a face that did not betray a thing. Snape did this for another year. Snape in that year did more harm and more good than any other single person did on either side. When he was killed finally by Nagini in the Shrieking Shack on Voldemort's orders, he lived long enough to press into Harry's palm a silver wisp of memory that told Harry at last everything. "Look at me," Snape said. He died looking at Lily Evans's green eye. He died looking at as well a second green, a very specific green Harry did not yet know his mother's other eyes were, a green that was the green of a forest floor 2 hours after sunset, and perhaps in the end Snape saw both and both were kind to him. Harry, kneeling beside him, said, "Thank you, Professor." Snape did not hear it, but Snape's face in the second of his death was the face of a man who was no longer being looked at with contempt. His chest lowered, he let go. Neville killed the snake. Nobody, not even Neville, had expected that. Neville, who had grown into his own broad shoulders in the last year, walked out into the clearing where Voldemort was waiting and where the Sorting Hat was, for reasons Harry understood and Voldemort could not, sitting on his head. Neville walked out while the castle was still burning in a ring around him. Neville walked out because Harry, under the body of a stag patroness and a traveling cloak in the hands of Hagrid, was inside the castle apparently dead. He was not dead. He had, about 40 minutes earlier, walked into the forest and allowed Voldemort to cast the killing curse at him. Moros had, in the last of their dream meetings, taught him how to receive it. The curse had worked on the 7th thing Voldemort had banked inside Harry for 16 years. It had burned out the shard in his skull, the low second heart he had felt all summer. It had not killed Harry. Harry had gone, for a matter of minutes, to a place that was between a place and not a place, which he would remember afterward as a small, clean railway station, and he had met in that station Dumbledore, and Dumbledore had told him briefly and clearly what was left to do. Harry had gone back. Hagrid carried him, pretending to weep, across the grass. The weeping was partly real. The pretending was partly pretending. Voldemort was pleased. Voldemort in his pleasure let the defenders of Hogwarts gather on the other side of the grass. Voldemort in his pleasure said cruel things about the boy who lived. Voldemort in his pleasure did not notice that the boy's eyes under the lashes were open. Neville, who had through 6 years endured jokes about his clumsiness that Harry had in his own way hated, stepped forward when Voldemort asked who would now take the side of the boy who died, and Neville took the side. Voldemort laughed. Voldemort set fire with a flick to the Sorting Hat on Neville's head. The hat, which was old and which had this past year developed, no one would have admitted it, a specific affection for Harry, spat out the sword of Gryffindor. Neville caught the sword in one hand. The mark on the crossguard of the sword flashed in the firelight. Thanatos' mark. Harry, from under Hagrid's arm, felt the mark go warm against his own palm in the impossible bond between a brother gift and the brother, and he smiled briefly against Hagrid's jacket. Neville cut the snake's head off. The snake was the 6th Horcrux. The 6th Horcrux died. The 7th had already died. Voldemort, in the middle of a clearing, in the middle of a laugh, became for the first time in 60 years what he had deep down always been trying not to be: mortal. Voldemort did not yet understand. Harry, from under Hagrid's jacket, understood. Harry slid down from Hagrid's arms and stood. The great hall was burning at one end. Voldemort and Harry, walking in slow circles through the ruin, did not burn. They did not notice the burning. The students in the hall and the Death Eaters at the doors had fallen back into a great rough ring and had stopped firing spells. The air over the hall had gone thick. Voldemort, across from Harry, had in his hand the Elder Wand. Voldemort did not know yet that the wand was not his. He had killed Snape to get it, on the mistaken theory that Snape was the wand's master. Snape had never been the wand's master. The wand had for the last year been mastered by a boy named Draco Malfoy, who had disarmed Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower. Draco, 3 weeks ago, had been disarmed by Harry on the floor of Malfoy Manor during an escape Harry had pulled off with a great deal of shadow and very little ceremony. The wand in Voldemort's hand, therefore, had for a month been loyal to Harry Potter. Harry did not tell him this. Harry let Voldemort come to it. Harry said quietly, "Tom." Voldemort stopped circling. "Do not call me that. That is what my godmother calls you, behind your back." Voldemort's eyes, in a face that had not yet realized it had ceased to be quite what it thought it was, narrowed. "Your godmother." "Yes, and who is your godmother?" "Her name is Hecate. You have been corresponding with a very persuasive imitation of her for 6 months. Harry smiled, a small, clean, private smile, not a sneer. "I should apologize for her. She is, as you may have noticed, a great practical joker." A silence fell over the ring of watchers. Hermione, at the edge of the ring, was the first to understand. She let out, she could not help it, a short breath that was almost a laugh. "She has been writing to you," Harry went on, conversationally, walking a little closer, "about the primordial fragment you have been trying, since 1992, to bind to yourself. She has been telling you that the fragment could be taken from Tartarus through a small crack near the Albanian border, that the small crack could be accessed on Walpurgis Night, that the binding could be completed, that you could become— you have been using the word apotheosis in your letters. We did laugh, a pseudo-primordial of emptiness. She has, I believe, sold you in the last 4 months a great quantity of what she and I have been privately calling counterfeit darkness. You are Tom right now, and I must apologize for this. I did not think Hecate would go this far, carrying within yourself a fragment of Erebus that is not Erebus. It is the leftover of a dream I had when I was 9. She packaged it for you very carefully. She sold it to you for the bones of 3 Horcruxes I have already destroyed." Voldemort's wand hand in the firelight trembled once. Voldemort said, "You are lying." "I am not. I know I am not. I invite you to test it. Reach inside yourself. Reach for the primordial darkness you think you have. Do you feel it?" Voldemort reached. Voldemort, who was too clever not to test a claim like that, reached. Voldemort found inside himself the fragment. The fragment felt to him still like a primordial fragment. It felt cold. It felt vast. Voldemort said, "It is there." "It is," Harry said. "It is a very good counterfeit. Hecate is a very good forger, but it is not primordial. Tell me, Tom, where did you get the dream of it?" "I do not. You do remember, 6 months ago. A dream of a boy in a cupboard, aged 9, asking very politely not to exist tonight because his cousin was going to hit him in the head with a pipe. You took that dream. You kept the cold of it. You have been, very carefully, calling that cold Erebus. Tom, the cold in you is the cold a 9-year-old has at night. It is not at all the cold of an old god. I should know. I am one." Voldemort raised his wand. Harry said very quietly, as his shadow, which he had let grow over the summer the way one lets a tall grass grow, rose up behind him. "You have 2 things wrong about me, Tom. One, you think my mother was Lily Evans and that I am merely a boy protected by a dead woman's love. You are not entirely wrong. Lily Evans was my mother, but you are wrong about the word merely. She made a bargain with my other mother long before I was born. My other mother is Nyx. You know her name. You may even have read it in a book. She is not a god who has gone to war for her children in 3,000 years. Tonight, because of you, she has broken that custom, not to fight, to watch." He pointed with his free hand, not at Voldemort but up, and every head in the great hall turned, and above the cracked and burning roof of Hogwarts a single sky had opened that was not the sky that had been over the castle a moment ago. It was a sky thick with stars. It was a sky the color of 5 minutes after sunset. The sky had in it a suggestion, just a suggestion, of a chariot standing still, as though its driver had dismounted to see something better. "Say hello, Tom. She is very old. She is not often discourteous." The watching ring of Hogwarts did not, in that long moment, breathe. Harry said too, "You think primordial darkness is a hoard, a thing you can pour into a cup, a thing you can become rich in. Tom, look at the sky, look at it. What do you see?" Voldemort, against his will, looked up. "Stars," Voldemort said. "Yes, thousands, millions. My mother is not the dark between them. My mother is the sky that holds them. You cannot become a cup, Tom, because a cup holds something other than itself. You have been all your life a man who wanted to be a cup full only of more cup. You are tonight finally what you have always been, an empty vessel. Hecate has not made you emptier. Hecate has merely let you notice. Voldemort fired. Harry let the curse come. Harry had for 3 years practiced. He did not draw it into his shadow. He did not deflect. He let it pass through him. It did not harm him. It could not. The curse had been aimed at the thing in him that it had in 1981 been aimed at, and that thing had died in the Forbidden Forest 40 minutes ago, and the curse, finding nothing in Harry to bind to, went through him and was gone. Voldemort fired again. Harry raised the Elder Wand. Yes, he was holding it. He had, in the quiet 3-second moment before Voldemort had fired the first curse, summoned it from Voldemort's hand with the small, silent, commanding Accio he had learned 3 years earlier, and he said aloud the one spell he had been saving. Expelliarmus, he said calmly. The curse Voldemort had just cast left Voldemort's mouth, went through the wood of Voldemort's wand, which had, for the last 60 seconds, been refusing to do anything useful for a man to whom it was no longer loyal, and rebounded neatly off Harry's disarming spell. The rebounded curse did not, as Voldemort had by now expected it might, bounce off Harry. It rebounded off the wand itself. The wand turned, the wand fired. The killing curse struck Lord Voldemort in the chest. He did not scream. He did not turn to smoke. He did simply fall, a small sound, a body unwoven. The empty vessel of him, having finally noticed itself, could not sustain its own last breath. He died in the great hall of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry on the morning of the 2nd of May, at 13 minutes past dawn. There was no further sound from the sky. The sky above Hogwarts took a long, slow breath and was, a moment later, merely the sky. Harry stood very still. Then he said, because he felt it, and because he did not, in that moment, have the energy for anything larger, "Sorry, everyone, I'd like to sit down for a minute." He sat down on the stone floor of the great hall with his back against a bench and the Elder Wand loose in his lap. Hermione reached him first. Ron reached him second. Luna, who had been at the far end of the hall, had been walking toward him since Harry had raised the wand and reached him third, and sat down next to him, as though this were the most natural thing in the world, and put her head on his shoulder. Ginny, who was on the other side of the hall holding her brother George, who was holding the body of his twin, looked across at Harry and nodded. That nod said, "Later. We'll have all the time later." Harry nodded back. The coda he allowed himself came 2 weeks later, not on a hill under a cold sky, but on a bench in a garden at the Burrow at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, with a cup of tea and a stale biscuit and a sun that was setting slower than was decent. He had finished reading the 27th letter of condolence from a stranger. He was staring at his hands. He was, as it turned out, alive. Luna drifted through the gate. Luna sat down on the opposite end of the bench. Luna did not say, "Are you all right?" because Luna knew Harry was not all right, and because Luna did not ask pointless questions. "I spoke to your mother this morning," Luna said conversationally. "Not in the sky way, in the garden way. There was a raven on the gate. It said hello. I think it was her. It probably was. She said you had done her proud." Harry closed his eyes. He said, "That is nice to hear. She said she will not be ashamed of you, ever. She said this is the one thing she can promise you." "Yes. She also said," Luna added thoughtfully, "that you are to take a nap." She was specific. She said, and I am quoting, "Tell him to take a nap, Luna, a proper one." Not under a cloak. Harry laughed in spite of himself. He laughed, a small, startled laugh that he had not made in months, and he leaned back, and he took Luna's hand briefly and let it go, and he closed his eyes. He did take a nap. He took it on the bench. He took it with the sun setting slowly on his face, and with a cup of cooling tea in his hand, and with a raven on the Burrow's gate that did not caw and did not, once, leave the railing. When he woke, Hermione was sitting beside him where Luna had been. Ron was in the kitchen, visibly arguing with Mrs. Weasley about a sandwich. Ginny, on the other bench, was reading a book and tapping her foot. Luna had gone to look at a plant. Harry sat up. "All right," Hermione said. "Yes," Harry said. I am actually all right, I think." "Well, good. You took a long nap, 4 hours. The raven's still there." Harry looked at the gate. The raven looked back at him. The raven, with the absolute calm dignity of its kind, inclined its head once and said, in the clear, polite, ancient Greek Harry had first heard at the age of 10 on the low wall of a hospital, "Mother loves you." Harry smiled, the 47th time in his life he had smiled and had not bothered to hide it, and it was a smile he did not even try to count. "Tell her I love her too," he said aloud in English, because Hermione was there and because Hermione had earned, years ago, the right to hear him say anything. The raven turned. The raven took off. The raven climbed in a slow spiral up into the afternoon sky, and a very small, cool shadow passed for a fraction of a second across the sun. Hermione, watching it go, said, "Harry, is your mother watching us? She is always watching us." "Oh," Hermione said. She thought about it. "Do we, I mean? Should we, do you think, wave?" Harry, who had never, in all 5 of his friends, loved any of them in the way he loved Hermione Granger in the 5 seconds after she asked that question, said, "Yes, I think we should." They waved. Far above them, in a sky that was only the sky, something very old and very patient and extremely fond of them both waved back. He chose, in the end, the 3rd path. He did not go to the Isle of Night in July. He did not set his gift down. He took quietly the long, slow road of Hecate's hardest option, mortal life inside a divine body, for as long as the mortal life would hold. He finished his 7th year at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall insisted, and Harry, who owed her a number of things including a detention he had never served, obliged her. He did not ever tell the press any of it. The press made up its own stories, which were worse than the truth and safer for him. He did not mind. He became in time an Auror. He became in a little more time the Auror the younger Aurors went to when they did not know what a corridor was doing. He married a woman he loved. He had 3 children. He named none of them Nyx. He was not ostentatious, but his 2nd son, James Sirius, had a shadow that in its cradle occasionally held its small hand up when the baby's small hand was down, and Harry, passing the cradle on long nights, would smile at the shadow politely and the shadow would wave. He saw Hecate twice more as a young man. He saw her, after the 2nd time, only in dreams. He saw Hypnos more frequently. Hypnos had developed a fondness for Harry's sofa. He saw Thanatos at the appointed times with the appointed people, and each time Thanatos was kind. He saw his mother, both of them, every night. Both of them watched him. Neither of them interfered. They were, in their own ways, content. On the night his first grandchild was born, a girl named Lily Luna Potter, with her father's nose and her grandmother's green eyes and a small quiet shadow that sat calmly in the corner of the birthing room and did not yet make trouble, Harry sat by the window of the hospital and looked up at the sky. The first star was out. 20 minutes earlier than the almanac had predicted. He recognized it. He nodded to it. "Mother," he thought politely up through the glass, "I am home." The star, which had been politely not moving, gave, for a fraction of a second, for only him, a small warm wink of the color of 5 minutes after sunset. Harry Potter closed his eyes and, for the first time in his life, had nothing he needed to hide. Chapter 6 End.